She stepped off the stagecoach, looked at the man who'd paid for her and said, "Before you decide, you should know I'm going to cost you everything." Caleb Harper laughed. He hadn't laughed in 6 years. "Ma'am, I've got a dying ranch and $40. That's not what I'm going to cost you." Behind them, the whole town of Dry Creek was watching and laughing and pitying him, the widower so broken he'd mailed away for a wife. They'd laugh for 11 more weeks. Then they'd learn who she really was. And 3 men in Chicago would learn she was still breathing. Before we go one step further, if you love stories about buried pasts, second chances, and the people everyone underestimates, take 1 second and hit subscribe. Stay with me all the way to the end, because what this woman burned in the fireplace on her very first night will change how you see every scene that follows. And down in the comments, tell me what city you're watching from tonight. I want to see just how far this story has traveled. Now, let's begin. 2 hours before that stagecoach came in, Caleb Harper stood in the Dry Creek land office and asked a man to lie for him. "Just till spring, Wallace." Wallace Kerrigan didn't look up. That was the thing Caleb would think about later. For 6 years he'd known this man sat in his church, bought him a beer when his mother passed, and Wallace Kerrigan couldn't lift his eyes off a ledger. "Caleb, 90 days. That's all I'm asking. Put a 90-day extension in that book and I'll have your money in April." "With what?" "With cattle." "You've got 60 head. I've got 110. "You've got 60, Wallace said, "and 40 of them you can't sell because they're bred to a bull that died of blackleg. And I've been carrying you since '89, and I want you to understand what carrying a man for 4 years does to a bank." Caleb put both hands on the counter. "Say it plain." "I am." "You're not. You've been not saying it for 10 minutes. He leaned in. "You had this answer before I walked in that door. You had it written down. I can see it upside down. Wallace, it's under your hand right now." Wallace Kerrigan moved his hand. Caleb read it. He read it twice, and then he stood up straight, and every drop of color went out of his face. "That's not a foreclosure notice." "No." "That's a purchase offer." "Yes." "Somebody offered on my land." Caleb's voice had gone strange. "Somebody offered on my land, and you had it in a drawer while I stood here begging." "Caleb, how much?" $1,200. Caleb laughed. It was an ugly sound, and 11 people on the street heard it through the window. $1,200 for 400 acres and water. It's more than you'll get at auction. It's a quarter of what it's worth, and you know it, and I know it, and whoever wrote that offer knows it better than the both of us. He picked the paper up. "Who's it from?" Wallace didn't answer. "Wallace, who's it from?" "There's no name." "Everything's got a name." "Not this," Wallace Kerrigan said. "That's what I'm telling you, Caleb, and I'd take it as a kindness if you'd listen to the how of it, and not just the what. That paper came in on the Tuesday train in an envelope with a bank draft already drawn from a firm in Cheyenne that I have never in 19 years heard of. It's got no name on it. It's got no man behind it. It's got a number." The land office went very quiet. "Then who signs it?" "I do," Wallace said. "That's the arrangement. I sign as agent." Caleb Harper looked at him for a long moment. "Wallace, don't. How many of these have you signed?" And Wallace Kerrigan, 48 years old, deacon, twice a widower himself, put his face in his hands right there behind the counter and said, 9. He walked out into the street and Sheriff Dodd Pryor was waiting for him, which was not an accident. "Caleb, not today, Dodd. Heard you were in there a while." "Heard from who?" Dodd Pryor smiled. He was 55, and he'd been sheriff of that county since the territory was a rumor, and Caleb had known him his whole life. "Son, there's 400 people in this town, and 11 of them were on this street. Nobody had to tell me anything." He fell in beside him. "You get your extension?" "No." "Didn't think so." Caleb stopped walking. "Why not?" "Come again." "You said didn't think so." He turned. Dodd, how'd you know I wanted an extension? I didn't tell one living soul. I got up this morning and I rode in and I stood in that office 9 minutes. Dodd Pryor's face did something. It was small. It was maybe half a second. And Caleb Harper, who had spent 6 years looking at nothing but the backs of cattle, saw it and didn't know yet that he'd remember it for the rest of his life. Everybody wants an extension, Dodd said. That's not an answer. Caleb, 9 ranches, Dodd. The street went quiet. 9, Caleb said. Same paper. Same firm out of Cheyenne. No name on any of them. That's Halloran's place, and the Mercers and old Ruiz's outfit on the fork. That's 9 families in this county in 4 years, and every one of them sold for a quarter and left, and nobody in this town has ever once said that number out loud. Dodd Pryor said very quietly, "Where'd you get that number?" "Wallace." "Wallace told you that?" Wallace put his face in his hands and said 9. And Dodd Pryor looked down the street at the land office for 11 seconds, and then he said something that Caleb would take out and turn over at 3 in the morning for the next 2 months. "Then you go home, son," he said, "and you don't say that number again." Pshaw. The stagecoach was late, and by the time it came in, there were 40 people on that street who had no earthly business being there. That was the part that got him, not the wife. He'd made his peace with the wife. The audience. "Look at him," Caleb said. Beside him, Marta Ruiz, 61 years old, the only person in Dry Creek still speaking to him, did not look at them. Don't. They came out for a show. They came out because it's the most interesting thing that's happened since the church burned. Marta adjusted her shawl. "You want them to have less fun? Look happy." "I'm not going to look happy." "Then they'll have more fun," Marta said. "That's the arrangement, mijo. That's always the arrangement." Somebody laughed behind them. Caleb didn't turn around. Then somebody said it out loud, not a whisper out loud on purpose, so it'd carry $6 says she's 40 and toothless. And Caleb Harper turned around. He turned around and the whole street stopped, because Caleb Harper had not turned around on anybody in 6 years, and there were men on that street who had never once seen his face straight on. "Bo Tillman," he said. Bo Tillman was 26 and drunk at 4 in the afternoon. "Aw, Caleb." "Say it again." "I'm just funnin'." "Say it again," Caleb said, "and use the number. You said $6. I want to hear you say $6 in front of your mother, Bo, because she's standing right there and she taught you Sunday school for 9 years. Nobody moved. Bo Tillman's mouth opened and nothing came out. "That's what I thought," Caleb said. And Marta Ruiz said under her breath, "Aye, and there he is. 6 years, and there he is. Marta, 6 years I've been feeding you, and you never once turned around." She was smiling, and there were tears in it. "And now a woman you've never met is on a coach 4 miles out, and you turn around." Caleb Harper had nothing to say to that, because the truth, the one he hadn't said to anybody, not to Marta, not to God, was that he hadn't written that letter to the bride agency in Omaha out of loneliness. He'd written it because a man alone can be pushed off his land. A man with a family is a fight. He'd done arithmetic, and he'd mailed away for a woman, and he was going to have to look her in the face in about 9 minutes and know it. She was the last one off. That was the first thing. There were 4 people on that coach, and she let all 3 of them go first, and she got off with 1 trunk, and she stood there, and she looked at the whole street. Not at him. At the street. 40 people. And Evelyn Brooks stood in the dirt and went down that whole line of faces one at a time, slow the way a man reads a brand, and by the time she got to the end of it, the laughing had stopped. Nobody could have told you why. Then she found him. "Mr. Harper." "Ma'am?" "You're taller than the letter said." "The letter didn't say." "No," Evelyn Brooks said. "It didn't." And Caleb Harper, 41 years old, stood in the middle of his own town, with 40 people watching, and could not think of one word in the English language. Marta stepped in. "Señora, I'm Marta Ruiz. I'll be at the ranch Tuesdays and Saturdays, and I've been feeding this man since 87, Evelyn said. Marta stopped. Pardon. Since 87, she said again, and picked up her own trunk, which two men on that street would later swear weighed 60 pounds when he lost them. You've been feeding him since 87, and he's never once asked you to, and you've never once stopped. Marta Ruiz stood in that street with her mouth open. How? Because you're the only one out here who isn't smiling, Evelyn Brooks said. Mr. Harper, is that your wagon? He got about a mile out of town before he said it. Before you decide, you should know something. All right. I'm going to lose that ranch. She didn't react. 90 days, maybe less. The bank won't extend, and there's an offer on it from a firm in Cheyenne with no name attached, and I've got 60 head of cattle and $40. His hands were tight on the reins. So you got on a coach in Omaha, and you rode 1,100 miles to marry a man who's got nothing, and I'd have told you in the letter, but if I'd told you in the letter, you wouldn't have come, and I needed you to come. Why? Ma'am, you said you needed me to come. Evelyn Brooks was looking straight ahead. You didn't say you wanted a wife. You said you needed me to come. Why? Caleb Harper's jaw worked. Because a man alone gets moved off, he said. And a married man's a lawsuit. And Evelyn Brooks laughed. It wasn't loud. It was one breath. But Caleb Harper turned and looked at her, and she had her hand over her mouth, and her eyes were shining, and she looked for about 2 seconds like an entirely different woman. That's the first true thing anybody said to me in 4 years, she said. Ma'am, Mr. Harper, I want you to hear me, and I want you to hear all of it, because we're going to be at your gate in 20 minutes, and after that we'll be polite for the rest of our lives, and we'll never say a real thing again. She turned. I don't want your money. I'm not going to ask you about your wife. And I am never ever going to ask you why you chose me. Can you live with that? Can you live with that? Most women'd want. I'm not most women, Mr. Harper, Evelyn Brooks said, and if you're very lucky, you'll never find out how much. She was in that house 11 minutes before she said the first thing she shouldn't have known. He had her trunk halfway down the hall when she said, "Don't put it in that room." He stopped. Ma'am, that's the child's room. Caleb Harper set the trunk down, very slowly. How do you know that? The door's got a hook on it, she said. High up, out of reach. Nobody puts a hook that high on a door unless there's something inside that room they're afraid will get out. Her voice was perfectly level. And it's been painted over. Once. Badly. By a man who didn't want to look at it but couldn't take it off. The hall was very quiet. 6 years, she said. Ma'am, there's a room in this house that hasn't been opened in 6 years, and it isn't the child's room, Mr. Harper. It's this one. It's the whole house. She picked up her own trunk. I'll take the room at the end, and I'd appreciate it if you'd take that hook off the door tomorrow, because I'm going to be living here, and I'm not going to walk past it every day. She walked past him. Caleb Harper stood in his own hallway and could not move. The clock started at 8. Not started, ran. It had not run since 1887, and Caleb Harper came in from the barn at 8 o'clock at night and heard a sound in his own front room that he had not heard in 6 years, and he stopped in the doorway with his hat in his hand. She was sitting on the floor with the back off it, and 11 pieces laid out on a cloth. It was the mainspring. What? It wasn't broken. It was wound wrong. She didn't look up. Somebody wound it backwards and then jammed it, and then gave up, and it's been sitting there 6 years with a perfectly good spring in it, doing nothing, because one time, somebody got it wrong in the dark. Caleb Harper stood in that doorway. That was me, he said. Evelyn Brooks stopped. The night she died, he said. It struck 4. And I remember thinking it was rude, ma'am, that's the word. It struck 4 while my wife was, he couldn't finish. So I got up and I wound it backwards till it stopped. She didn't say anything. Nobody knows that, Caleb said. Nobody in the world knows that. Marta's been in this house twice a week for 6 years, and she thinks it's broke. It's not broke. I know. Mr. Harper, it kept time all along, he said, and his voice broke straight down the middle, and he turned around and walked out. Evelyn Brooks sat on that floor with a spring in her hand for 11 minutes. Then she put the clock back together, and she set it to the right hour, and she never mentioned it again as long as she lived. The horse was the second thing. The horse was worse. "Don't put a saddle on that one," she said the next morning. Caleb, 20 feet away with the saddle already in his arms, stopped dead. "Ma'am, I've had this horse. He won't take an unfamiliar hand. He'll stand for it. He'll let you get the girth. And about the time you get your foot up, he'll go sideways into the rail and break your leg against it, and he's done it before, and there's a piece out of that rail about the height of a man's knee." Caleb Harper looked at the rail. There was a piece out of it, at the height of a man's knee. "That was Halloran," he said slowly. "4 years ago. Broke his leg in 2 places, and he's still got the limp. And how in God's name?" "Because the horse told me." "Horses don't. He's got a white mark on his offside about the size of a hand, where a saddle sat on a sore for a season," Evelyn said. "And he's been ruined by exactly one man, and he'll take you, Mr. Harper, because he knows you. And he'll take me in about 3 weeks. And he'll never take a stranger again as long as he lives, and that's not meanness. That's memory." She walked away. Caleb Harper stood there with a saddle in his arms. And then he said to nobody out loud in his own corral, "Who are you, bro?" The portrait was the third thing, and it was the one that got her caught. She'd been in that house 9 hours. She was carrying a lamp down the hall at 9:30 at night, and she went past the front room and she stopped. She stopped for exactly 1 second, and Caleb Harper, who was sitting in the dark in his own chair where she couldn't see him, because that's what he did every night. That's what he'd done every night for 6 years. Watched his mail-order bride look at his dead wife's portrait and go absolutely white. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry out. Her face just changed, like something falling, and then she fixed it. In about a second and a half, she put it away and got her breath and walked on down that hall like nothing on earth had happened. Caleb Harper sat in the dark, and his heart was going like a hammer. Because he'd seen it. And because in 6 years of the 1,100 people who had looked at that portrait, the neighbors, the preacher, the woman from the agency, the men who came to buy cattle, not one had ever once reacted to it. It's a portrait of a dead woman. You look at it. You say she was lovely. You move on. You don't go white. You go white when you recognize somebody. He didn't sleep. He lay in that bed and he did what he'd been doing for 6 years, which was arithmetic, and the arithmetic went like this. She knew the clock. She knew the horse. She knew the door. She knew Marta had been feeding him since '87, and she knew it off a street in 9 seconds. And she'd looked at Anna's face, and she'd known something. At 2:30 in the morning, Caleb Harper heard a floorboard. He got up. He went down that hall in his socks, and he stopped at the corner, and he looked into his own front room, and Evelyn Brooks was on her knees at the fireplace with a leather journal open in her lap. She was tearing out a page. 1 page. Careful. She ran her thumbnail down the seam so it wouldn't rip the binding, and Caleb Harper stood in his own hallway and watched a woman he'd been married to for 9 hours do something to a book that only a person who loved books does. Then she read it. Her whole face went. And Evelyn Brooks, who had gotten off a coach in front of 40 laughing people and never blinked, sat on the hearth of a stranger's fireplace at 2:30 in the morning and put her hand over her mouth and shook. She put it in the fire. She watched it the whole way. She didn't look away once, and when it was gone, she said out loud to nothing, "No one can ever know who I really am." Caleb Harper went back to bed. He lay there till the sun came up, and here's the thing. He'd never tell anybody, not for 4 years. Not till he was standing in a courthouse in Cheyenne with his hand on a Bible. He wasn't afraid. He should have been. Any man in the territory would have been. There was a woman in his house who'd burned a page at 2 in the morning and said no one can ever know who I really am, and the correct feeling was fear. What Caleb Harper felt lying in the dark with his heart going was the first thing he'd felt in 6 years. He felt curious. He felt like a man who had a reason to get up. And he thought, whatever's coming for her, it's going to have to come through my gate. Marta came Tuesday, and by noon, she'd made her decision. She's not a bride. Marta, escúchame. Marta had him by the sleeve in his own barn. I have been in that kitchen since your mother, God rest her, 31 years, and that woman reorganized my pantry, Caleb. So she did it right. Caleb blinked. That's Marta, that's the opposite of a complaint. It is not. Marta's eyes were huge. Flour and salt at the back. Coffee at eye. Lamp oil out of the sun and up off the floor. Dried meat hung Caleb. She hung it the way my mother hung it. And my mother was born in Sonora in 1831, and there is not one woman between here and Cheyenne who hangs meat like that anymore. She let go of his sleeve. That's not a housewife. That's somebody who has been in 400 pantries. Meaning what? Meaning she's counted things, Marta said. For a living. For a long time. The town gave it 3 weeks. Then the town changed its mind, and the way it changed its mind was ugly, and it started at the mercantile. She wants the ledger, Amos Bird said. Amos. Your wife came in here on a Thursday and asked to see my ledger, Caleb. Amos Bird was 70 and shaking. Nobody's asked me that in 34 years. Not the bank, not the sheriff, not the taxman in Cheyenne. What did you tell her? I told her no. And Amos Bird stopped. And she said thank you, he said slowly. And she bought her flour. And then she stood in my doorway, and she said, Mr. Bird, you're paying 11 cents a pound to freight, and the Halloran place used to pay 6, and the Halloran place is gone, and you've never wondered why your freight went up the month the ranch went under. The store was quiet. And then she left, Amos said. Caleb Harper stood there. Amos. Yeah. Did your freight go up? And Amos Bird, 70 years old in that store since before the war, put both hands on his counter and said in the voice of a man who has just been woken up 9 times. She sold the cattle in the 6th week, not 60 head. 40. And she sold the 40 that couldn't calve the ones that were worthless. The ones that had been eating him alive since the bull died, and she sold them to a buyer out of Laramie for $11 a head over market, and Caleb Harper found out about it after it was done. You sold my cattle. I sold your problem? Ma'am, you had no... I had a signature. Evelyn didn't look up from the table. Your signature. You gave me the household accounts in week 2 because you hate arithmetic, and you told me, and I'm quoting, do whatever you want, I don't want to look at it. That's not the same as... It's exactly the same as, and you know it's the same as, and you're not angry about the cattle. She looked up. Mr. Harper, say the real thing. Caleb Harper stood in his own kitchen. How'd you get 11 over? She went back to her figures. Ma'am. The buyer's from Laramie. So he doesn't know what a Dry Creek cow is worth, Evelyn said. Because Dry Creek hasn't sold a cow at auction in 4 years. Everything in this county sells private. Everything in this county sells to the same 3 men, and there's no price, Mr. Harper. There's no market, there's nothing to compare to. And so every rancher in 40 miles has been taking whatever number he's handed and calling it the going rate. She set the pencil down. There is no going rate, she said. Somebody killed it. Yeah. By the 9th week, they'd stopped laughing. By the 10th, they were afraid of her. And the exact moment it turned was a Tuesday afternoon in the street outside the bank, and there were 11 witnesses, and every one of them told it the same way for the rest of their lives. Wallace Kerrigan came out the door with a ledger under his arm and a man from Cheyenne beside him, and he tripped. That's all. A grown man tripped on his own step. The ledger went into the dirt, and it came open, and Evelyn Brooks, who was 20 feet away with a sack of flour, looked down at an open page for about 4 seconds. Wallace scrambled for it. The man from Cheyenne got there first, and Evelyn Brooks said in a perfectly pleasant voice to nobody in particular, "That's a nice hand?" Wallace Kerrigan froze on his knees in the street. "What? Whoever writes your K's." She adjusted the flower on her hip. "That's a lovely K. It's got a little tail on it. You don't see that anymore." And Wallace Kerrigan went the color of paper. Because there were 9 signatures in that book with a little tail on the K. And Wallace Kerrigan had signed exactly one of them. He got up. He didn't dust himself off. He walked back into that bank, and he shut the door, and 11 people watched him not come out for the rest of the day, and the man from Cheyenne stood in the street and watched Evelyn Brooks walk to a wagon and put a sack of flour in it. He watched her for a long time. Then he took a small book out of his coat and wrote something in it. Marta Ruiz saw him do it. Sheriff Dodd Pryor rode out to the Harper place on a Friday and stayed 40 minutes and asked 11 questions and got nothing. "Ma'am, where's your people from?" "East." "East where?" "Mr. Pryor, are you asking as the sheriff or as a man having coffee?" Dodd Pryor smiled. "Little of both." "Then I'll answer the coffee," Evelyn said. "East." He laughed out loud. Then he stopped laughing. "There's no record of you." Nobody moved. "I wired Omaha," Dodd said. "Bride agency. Nice folks. Very helpful. They've got a file on Evelyn Brooks that's 11 months old, and it's got a letter of character in it from a minister in Council Bluffs." He turned his cup. "There's no minister in Council Bluffs." The kitchen was silent. "There's no church," Dodd said. "There's no man by that name. I wired twice." Caleb Harper stood up. "Dodd." "Sit down, Caleb." "This is my house." "Sit down, son," Dodd Pryor said, "because I am not doing this to hurt her. And if you'd stop being 19 years old for 1 minute, you'd see it." Caleb sat down. Dodd looked at Evelyn. "Ma'am, I've been sheriff of this county 22 years, he said. "In that time, I have had exactly 1 person come into it with no past. 1. And I want you to understand that I don't care. I don't care where you're from. I don't care what your name was. I don't care what you did. I've got no paper on you, and I'm not looking for any." "Then why are you here?" And Dodd Pryor said, "Because somebody else is looking, ma'am." Evelyn Brooks did not move. "There's a man been in my town 9 days, Dodd said. Stays at the hotel. Doesn't drink, doesn't gamble, doesn't buy anything. Eats at the same table every day at 11 and writes in a little book." He set his cup down. "And on Tuesday, he watched you pick up a sack of flour, and he wrote in it for a full minute. And ma'am, I have been doing this a long time, and there is only one kind of man who writes for a full minute about a woman buying flour." Nobody breathed. "What kind?" Caleb said. "A Pinkerton," Dodd Pryor said. Evelyn Brooks stood up and went to the window and stood there with her back to the room for a long time. "Ma'am?" "How old is he?" Dodd blinked. "Come again." "How old is the man?" 60, maybe more." "Is he a big man?" "No, ma'am. Little fella. Thin." "Does he have a bad hand?" The kitchen went absolutely still. Dodd Pryor said very slowly, "His right hand don't open all the way." And Evelyn Brooks put her hand flat on the window frame. "Oh," she said. "Ma'am. Oh, thank God." Caleb Harper stood up so fast the chair went over. "Thank God. Mr. Harper, you just found out there's a Pinkerton in this town, and you said thank God." "Because he's alive," Evelyn Brooks said, and that was the sentence. That was the one that hung in that kitchen and would not come down. "Who is he?" Caleb said. She didn't answer. "Ma'am, who is he?" "Mr. Harper." "Who is he?" And Evelyn Brooks turned around, and Dodd Pryor said afterward many times to many people, always with the same look on his face, that in 22 years of law, he had never once seen a person's face do what that woman's face did. "He's the last one," she said. "The last what?" "There were 4 of us," Evelyn Brooks said. Nobody moved. 4, she said. "That's all. That's the whole number. 4 people in the United States of America who could put a name to what's been done in this county, and 8 counties like it, and one of them was shot in a doorway in Chicago in front of his wife, and one of them walked out of a hotel in Denver in March of '91, and has never been seen by any living soul since. Her voice was shaking, and her face was not. And I got on a train. That's what I did. That's the whole heroic thing. I got on a train, and then another train, and then a coach, and I've been 11 months hanging meat in a pantry. Evelyn. And the fourth one. She said the fourth one had his hand broken with a hammer in a livery in Cheyenne in December of '91, so he'd stop writing things down. She looked at Dodd Pryor. He's here, she said. He's alive, and he's here, and he's been sitting in a hotel for 9 days, writing in a book, which means he's been watching me for 9 days to make sure I'm alone before he comes to my door. Ma'am, he's not hunting me, Sheriff, Evelyn Brooks said. He's warning me. Caleb Harper said, then let's go get him. Everybody turned. Caleb. He's at a hotel. Caleb was already reaching for his hat. He's 4 miles away, eating dinner at 11 o'clock every day like a clock, and he's been trying to get to my wife for 9 days, and I've got a wagon. Mr. Harper, ma'am, I have had 90 days on this ranch since October, and it's January. His voice cracked. I've got about 11 days left. The bank won't move. There's a man in Cheyenne with no name who's already bought 9 of my neighbors for a quarter, and I have spent 6 years being the saddest thing in this county, and letting every single person I know pity me about it. Caleb. And you burned a page in my fireplace, he said. She went white. You burned a page at 2 in the morning on your first night, and you said no one can ever know who I really am, and I have known that for 11 weeks, and I have never said one word. Nobody breathed. You saw that, Evelyn said. I saw all of it. Why didn't you? Because I didn't care, Caleb Harper said. That's the whole thing. That's what I've been trying to say since October, and I'm bad at it. There's a woman in my house who fixed my clock and knew about my door, and every single person in this town has been laughing at me for 6 years and pitying me for 4, and not one of them ever noticed the clock was wound backwards. He stopped. He put his hand over his face. They pitied me, he said, every day, for 4 years. And you got off a coach, and you looked at 40 people, and you found the one who wasn't smiling. Evelyn Brooks could not speak. So no, ma'am, I don't care who you really are, Caleb Harper said. I care that a man broke your friend's hand with a hammer, and I've got a wagon, and it's Friday. Dodd Pryor stood up. I'm going to say one thing, he said, and then I'm going to leave, and I want the both of you to hear it, because I'm 55, and I'm not brave, and this is as close as I'll get. They waited. That offer on your land, he said. The one from Cheyenne, with no name. What about it? It came to my office too. Caleb Harper's whole body went cold. What? Not for land. Dodd Pryor put his hat on and would not look at either of them. For a service. Came in on the Tuesday train in November, in an envelope from a firm I never heard of, and it offered me $400 a year, that's twice my salary. Caleb to do nothing at all except let them know if anybody new came into this county and started asking questions. Nobody moved. I didn't take it, Dodd said. Dodd, I didn't take it, he said, and his voice broke. And I have been sitting on that envelope for 14 months, and I never told one living soul, and you want to know the worst part, son? I never told anybody because I couldn't figure out how they knew to ask. He got to the door. Somebody in this town told them I was for sale, Dodd Pryor said. 14 months I've been sitting in that office looking at 400 people and wondering which one of you looked at me and thought that man'll take it. He walked out. And Evelyn Brooks said to his back, Sheriff? He stopped. What was the number on the envelope? Dodd Pryor turned around very slowly. How'd you know there was a number? Because there's always a number, Evelyn said. Because they don't have names. Because there's a man in an office in Chicago who has never in his life signed anything, and he runs it out of a ledger, and every man he owns is a line in it. She was moving toward him. What was the number, Sheriff? Ma'am. What was the number? And Dodd Pryor said 41. Evelyn Brooks sat down. She sat down right there on the floor of that kitchen in her own house, and Caleb Harper got to her in 2 steps and went down on his knees beside her, and she was not crying, and that was the terrible part. Ma'am? 41, she said. Evelyn, I only ever found 9. Her hands were over her face. 4 years, 9 counties, 9 towns, 9 Caleb. I stood in a room in Chicago in front of 3 federal attorneys, and I said the number 9, and I said it like it was the whole thing. I said it like I'd found something. Evelyn, listen. There's 41, she said. Nobody spoke. There's 41 of these, Evelyn Brooks said, and I have been hiding in a pantry. She got up at 4 in the morning, and Caleb Harper was already in the kitchen because he hadn't gone to bed either. They looked at each other. You want coffee? He said. No. Okay. She sat down. Mr. Harper? Caleb. Caleb. She put her hands flat on the table. I'm going to tell you my name. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. Her voice was shaking now finally, 11 weeks late. That's why I'm going to. Do you understand? That's the only reason anybody ever tells anybody anything, because they don't have to. And Caleb Harper said, then wait. She stopped. Did I... What? Wait till the sun's up, he said. Wait till we're standing in front of that old man with the bad hand. Wait till there's somebody in the room who already knows it, so it's not just you and me and a table at 4 in the morning and you handing me the only thing you've got left. He reached across and put his hand over hers. First time. 11 weeks, and it was on a table at 4 in the morning in the worst week of both their lives. Because I've had a woman tell me a secret at 4 in the morning before, Caleb Harper said, and I've spent 6 years wishing to God I'd made her wait till daylight so I could see her face when she said it. Evelyn Brooks turned her hand over under his. Caleb? Yeah. When we walk into that hotel, she said, everything changes. I know. No, you don't. Listen. The second that man says my name in front of a witness, there's a wire out of this town by noon, and there's a man in Chicago who spent 4 years and God knows how much money making sure I'm dead, and he will find out on a Friday that he was wrong. I know. They will come here. I know, Caleb Harper said. Then why are you doing it? And Caleb Harper said, because for 6 years, everybody in Dry Creek has looked at me like I was already buried, and today's the first day since '87 that I've had something they want. He stood up and got his hat. Let him come, he said. I'm home. He was wrong about that, and it took him 11 hours to find out. The hotel dining room was empty at 11 o'clock, except for one table, and the man at it had a plate of eggs he hadn't touched and a small book he'd closed the second the door opened. He stood up. He stood up so fast, his chair went over backward, and he didn't pick it up, and he stood there with his right hand curled against his chest, like something he'd been carrying for 2 years, and he looked at Evelyn Brooks, and his whole face came apart. Oh, he said. Ira. Oh, Lord. Ira. You're fat, Ira Kessler said, and then he sat down in a chair that wasn't there and went into the floor. Caleb Harper got him up. He weighed about 110 pounds, and he was shaking so hard his teeth were going, and Evelyn Brooks knelt in front of him in a hotel dining room and took his ruined hand in both of hers like it was a bird. You're eating, Ira said. You're, ma'am, you've got color. I've been hanging meat in a pantry. You've been... He laughed. It turned into something else halfway. Eleanor, I've been 11 months. I've been through Council Bluffs. I've been through Omaha. I've been in every bride office between here and the Missouri River. Caleb Harper said, What did you call her? Nobody answered him. What did you call her? And Ira Kessler looked up at the man who'd just picked him up off a floor, and then he looked at Dodd Pryor standing in the doorway with his hat in his hands, and then he looked at Evelyn, and Evelyn Brooks closed her eyes. Go on, she said. Ma'am, you've been sitting in this room 9 days to say it. Say it. And Ira Kessler said, her name is Eleanor Whitmore. The room was very quiet. She was the chief forensic accountant for the Northern District Receivership, Ira said. Chicago, 4 years. She's read more ledgers than any living person in the United States of America, and she can hold 9 columns in her head, and she's the only reason there was ever a case at all. And gentlemen, I want you to understand that I was a Pinkerton for 31 years, and I have never in my life met anybody who could do what she does. Dodd Pryor sat down. He didn't ask. He just sat down. Ira, Evelyn said. Stop. No. Ira. No, ma'am. I've had 9 days. His voice was going. I've had 9 days in this room watching you buy flour, and I've had 11 months on a train, and I've got one thing left in me, and it's this, so let me say it. She let go of his hand. They killed Sam Ostrander in a doorway, Ira Kessler said, in front of his wife, 18 months ago. And Vance walked out of a hotel in Denver in March of '91, and there's never been a body, and there's never been a word. And I sat in a livery in Cheyenne in December of that year, and a man I'd never seen before put my hand on a barrel and hit it 4 times with a hammer, while another man held my mouth. Caleb Harper made a sound. And I want to be clear about the arithmetic, Ira said, because everybody gets it wrong. They didn't do that to hurt me. They did that because I write things down. That's all. That's my whole use on this earth. I've written in a book every day since 1862, and they took the hand I do it with, and they left me every other part. Nobody spoke. And ma'am, Ira Kessler said, I have spent 2 years learning to do it left-handed. He put the little book on the table. He pushed it across with the back of his wrist. There it is, he said. That's 4 years. That's every name I could get, and it's ugly and it's crooked, and it took me 200 hours. Evelyn Brooks did not touch it. Ira. Take it. Ira, why are you here? And Ira Kessler said, because I can't testify. Bummer. I'm a paid man, he said. 31 years. Any lawyer in Cheyenne stands up and says, Mr. Kessler, who's paid you in your life, and I've got to sit there and say the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, and then he says, and who has retained the Pinkerton National Detective Agency in the last 9 years, and Eleanor. He stopped. You know who. I know who. Say it for the sheriff. Evelyn didn't look up. The railroads, she said. Dodd Pryor put his face in his hand. I'm a broken man with a book, Ira said. That's all I am. I could stand up in a courtroom and read 41 names off this table, and any first-year attorney out of Denver would have me for lunch by noon, and every one of those 41 would walk out that door and go home and eat supper. He was crying now, and his voice never moved. It's not evidence, ma'am. It's a rumor in a nice binding. Then what is it? It's a roadmap, Ira Kessler said. For somebody who can testify. Orcha. Caleb Harper had not sat down. You came here to use her. Caleb. No. He was very calm, and everybody in that room could see what it was costing him. No, I want it said out loud with a sheriff in the room. You rode 11 months, and you crawled through every bride office on the Missouri River to find a woman who's been hiding for her life, and you found her, and you did it so you could put her back in a courtroom. Yes, Ira Kessler said. Say it again. Yes. Mr. Harper, you'd get her killed. I'd get her killed, Ira agreed. Caleb Harper turned around and put both hands on the back of a chair and held on to it. Get out of my county, he said. Caleb. Get out of my county, mister, and take your book. There's more, Ira said. Nobody moved. Evelyn Brooks said, Ira. There's more, and I've been 9 days on it, and it's the only reason I'm still in this chair. Ira. Ma'am, I have to say it in front of them because if I say it to you alone, you'll take it, and you'll walk out of here, and you'll be gone by dark, and I'll never. Say it, Caleb said, And Ira Kessler, 63 years old, 31 years, a detective put his good hand flat on the table and said, "I already sent the wire." Evelyn Brooks stood up. She stood up so slowly that Dodd Pryor said later, it was like watching a woman get taller. When? 6 days ago. When Ira? Tuesday. Last Tuesday. 4 in the afternoon. He couldn't look at her. To a man in Chicago named Petrie, who's been my case officer 19 years, and who I would have, ma'am, I'd have put my life in that man's hands. I did. I did it for 19 years, and I sat in that telegraph office, and I sent 5 words, and I have been sitting in this room ever since. What 5 words? Ira. What 5 words? And Ira Kessler said, "Found her. Dry Creek. Advise." The room went absolutely silent. "Advise," Evelyn Brooks said. "Yes." "You asked them for instructions." "I asked my agency. There is no difference." It came out of her like something tearing, and Caleb Harper had never heard that voice out of her, not once in 11 weeks, not on the day she got off a coach in front of 40 laughing people. "There has never been a difference, Ira. That's what I stood in a room in Chicago and said to 3 federal attorneys, and they laughed at me. They laughed. They said, 'Miss Whitmore, you're describing a detective agency,' and I said, 'No, gentlemen, I'm describing a payroll.' I know. You were in the room. I know. You were standing at the back of the room with your hat in your hands, and you knew, and you sent them my—" She stopped. She put her hand over her mouth. 6 days, she said. Yes. 6 days, Ira. That's Chicago to Cheyenne in a day. That's Cheyenne to here in— She turned and looked at Dodd Pryor. "Sheriff," she said, "how many strangers are in this town today?" And Dodd Pryor said in the voice of a man who has just felt the floor go, 4. "Gang!" Caleb Harper walked out into the street. He walked out into the middle of his own town at noon on a Friday, and he stood there, and he counted, and Marta Ruiz came out of the mercantile and found him doing it. "Mijo, there's a man on the hotel porch." "Caleb, there's a man on the hotel porch, and there's a man at the livery, and there's 2 by the bank, and I have lived here my entire life. Marta and I don't know one of them." His voice was strange. "And they got here before us. They were here when we rode in this morning. I rode past 3 men, and I never looked at one." Marta Ruiz took his arm. "Come inside." "I don't have a gun." "Caleb, I've got a rifle in a wagon 4 miles from here," he said, "and my wife is in that hotel." And Marta Ruiz, 61 years old, said, "Then get your wife." Ed. They came out the back, and they were 9 miles gone before anybody said anything, and it was Ira, jammed in the wagon bed with his book against his chest. "They won't move today." "You don't know that." "Mr. Harper, I've been at this 31 years, and I'm telling you those men will not move today, and I'd stake my life on it, and ma'am." He leaned forward. "Eleanor, look at me. They're not here to do a thing. They're here to see if it's you." "They know it's me. They know a detective with a broken hand says it's you," Ira said. "That's all Petrie's got. That's a wire from a man they crippled 2 years ago, and I want you to understand how that reads in an office in Chicago. It reads like a cripple looking for a bonus." He almost laughed. "They've got no photograph, ma'am. There's never been one. 4 years, and there has never once been a photograph of you in any file in this country, and I know because I looked. I looked for 2 years, and that's the only reason you're breathing." Evelyn Brooks said very quietly, "There's one." The wagon nearly went in the ditch. "Ma'am." "There's one photograph," she said. "There's no Chicago. 91. February." Her hands were in her lap, and they were perfectly still. "The attorneys wanted a record of the working group. 6 of us on the courthouse steps. Ostrander made a joke, and Vance wouldn't stand still, and it took the man 11 minutes. Ira Kessler had gone the color of paper. "Where is it?" "There were 3 prints." "Where is it, Eleanor?" "One went to the department," she said. "One went to Ostrander, and it was on his wall in the room where they shot him. And it is not on that wall anymore, Ira. I've thought about that every night for 18 months. And the third, and Eleanor Whitmore said, Vance had it. The wagon rolled. Nobody said anything for a mile. He's dead, Ira said finally. Yes. He's been dead 2 years. Yes. There's no body. No. There's no body, ma'am, and I've said that out loud about 400 times, and every single time I've said it like it was a comfort. Ira. Like it meant maybe. Ira. What if it doesn't mean maybe? Ira Kessler said. And Caleb Harper driving said, What does that mean? Nobody answered him. Ma'am, what does that mean? And Eleanor Whitmore said, It means a man can be missing 2 ways. She told him about the portrait that night, and she told him because he asked, and he asked because he'd been holding it for 11 weeks. You went white. Caleb. First night, you came down that hall with a lamp, and you looked at Anna's picture, and you went white, and I was sitting in that chair in the dark, and you didn't know, and I have not said one word about it for 11 weeks. Eleanor Whitmore sat down. Ask me. I'm asking. No, ask me properly. Her voice was shaking. Because I've been in your house 11 weeks, and you've never asked me one question, and I know why, and I want you to stop. Ask me the way you'd ask a stranger. And Caleb Harper said, Did you know my wife? No. Then, I've seen her face, Eleanor Whitmore said. The room went quiet. Where? In a file. Caleb Harper sat down very slowly on a chair that was there. Say that again. In a federal file in Chicago in the spring of 1890, she said, in a folder about 11 inches thick. And it was the 9th or 10th thing I looked at that day. And I did not think about it again for 4 years. And then I walked down a hallway with a lamp. That's not... He couldn't get it out. Ma'am, my wife never left this territory. She was born in Cheyenne, and she died 4 miles from where you're sitting, and she never in her life. She wrote letters, Eleanor said. Caleb Harper stopped breathing. 22 of them, she said. Between June of 85 and January of 87. To the General Land Office. To the Department of the Interior. To a senator in Washington who never answered one of them. And to the Surveyor General of the Territory 4 times, and the 4th one is 9 pages long. And it is the single most competent document I have ever read by a person with no training. And Caleb, I want you to hear me. I have read 10,000 documents. Caleb Harper was shaking his head. No. She caught it, Eleanor Whitmore said. In 1885, 6 years before anybody in Chicago knew there was anything to catch. She sat in this house and she caught it off her own deed off one bad number in a survey line, and she wrote 22 letters about it, and nobody in the United States government ever wrote her back. No. Caleb. She'd have told me. And Eleanor Whitmore said, Did you ever ask her what she did all day? He got up, he went out. He was gone 40 minutes, and when he came back in, his hands were shaking so bad he couldn't get his coat off, and Eleanor Whitmore was exactly where he'd left her. They killed her. No. They killed her. 22 letters, ma'am. 22 letters, and then a blizzard, and a woman who'd rode this country her whole life, and knew that draw better than... No, Caleb. You don't know that. I do know that, Eleanor Whitmore said, and I'm going to tell you how I know, and you're going to hate me for about a year. He stood there. The letters stopped in January of 87, she said. And the file's got a note on it. It's a clerk's note in pencil at the bottom, and it's dated April of 87, and it says 4 words. What words? Correspondent deceased. Weather closed. Caleb Harper put his hand on the wall. Weather, he said. Yes. They wrote weather. They wrote it because it was true, Eleanor said. That's the thing I need you to hear, and it's the cruelest thing I've ever said to a living soul. Nobody killed Anna. Nobody had to. A woman who was smarter than every man in Washington wrote 22 letters into a hole for 18 months, and then it snowed, and a clerk in an office closed her file with a pencil and 4 words and went to lunch. Caleb Harper slid down that wall and sat on the floor of his own front room. I wanted it to be them, he said. I know. 6 years. 6 years I've been... He put his hands over his face. Ma'am, for about 11 seconds just now, I had somebody to blame, and I'd have given this ranch for it. I'd have given my hands, and you took it back. And Eleanor Whitmore said, I'd have taken it too. Marta Ruiz came Tuesday and knew inside of 4 minutes. Something happened. Marta, something happened and nobody's going to tell me. She put her basket down. 31 years in this kitchen, mijo. Your mother told me when your father was drinking. Anna told me when she couldn't have another one. Her voice went. Anna told me everything, Caleb, and I've never said one word of it to you in 6 years, because it wasn't mine. And now there's a woman in this house who looks like she's been shot, and a man in the barn with a broken hand, and you want me to make biscuits. Caleb Harper looked at her. Marta. What? Did Anna write letters? Marta Ruiz stood in that kitchen with a basket at her feet. And she said, Ay Dios. Marta. Twice a week. She sat down. She had to. For 2 years. I posted them for her because she didn't want you seeing her at the office. She'd give me an envelope on a Tuesday, and I'd put it in my apron, and I'd walk it in. And I never once looked at it, and she never once told me, and I never once asked because it wasn't mine. And Caleb, Marta, she cried about it. Marta Ruiz said, in this kitchen, about a letter. And I held her and I asked her what was wrong, and she said, Marta, I think they're not reading them. Nobody breathed. And I said, Mija, of course they're reading them. They're the government. Marta put her face in her hands. That's what I said to her, she said. That's the comfort I gave that girl. They're the government. Ira Kessler read the 22 letters in a barn, over 4 days off copies he'd never seen, and when he came out, he was a different man. Mr. Harper. Mr. Kessler. I owe you an apology, and it's going to be a strange one, so bear with me. He had the book against his chest. I came to this county to use your wife. I know. I've spent 9 days in a hotel building, a speech about how she owed the country a debt, and it was a good speech, sir. I'm ashamed to tell you how good it was, and I've been saying it to a mirror since Tuesday. His voice cracked. And then I sat in your barn for 4 days and read a dead woman's mail. Caleb Harper didn't move. She had it in 85, Ira said. Mr. Harper, do you understand what that is? We put 6 people on that in Chicago for 4 years with a federal receivership and $100,000 and subpoena power, and a rancher's wife in Wyoming Territory had the shape of it in 18 months with a deed and a pencil. She was smart, Caleb said. She was better than smart, Ira Kessler said. She was right, and that's not the same, and it costs about 100 times more. He turned to go. Then he stopped. Sir, I'll leave in the morning. Pueme. What? I'll leave in the morning, and I'll take my book, and I won't ask her again, and I've been up 2 nights getting to that. He wouldn't look up. Because I read those letters and I thought, my God. There's the reason. There's the reason nobody helped her. She was alone. She was the only one. And she rode into a hole for 18 months, and it killed her. And the only thing worse than being wrong in this country is being right by yourself. He got to the barn door, and then, I thought, Ira Kessler said, that's exactly what I came here to do to Eleanor. Eleanor Whitmore was standing in the doorway. She'd been there 4 minutes. Ira! He stopped. You're not leaving. Ma'am? You're not leaving because I'm not going to be alone, Eleanor Whitmore said. That's the difference. That's the whole difference, and it took a dead woman's mail to show it to me. And I have been standing in this door for 4 minutes, and I want it said out loud in front of the both of you. Eleanor. She was one, she said. Anna Harper was one in 1885, with a deed and a pencil and nobody. And I've got you, and I've got 41 names in a book, and I've got a sheriff who didn't take $400, and I've got a woman who posted the letters, and I've got... She stopped. She looked at Caleb Harper. And I've got a man who turned around on a street, she said. Nobody spoke. Ma'am, they will come, Ira said. They're already here. Eleanor. There's 4 men in Dry Creek eating 3 meals a day and writing in little books, Eleanor Whitmore said. And they've been there 9 days and they have not moved, and I've been 6 days figuring out why, and I've got it, and neither of you is going to like it. Say it. And she said, they're waiting for the deed. She put it on the table and it took her 40 minutes. 41, she said. That's what Dodd's envelope told us, and I've been sick with it a week because for 4 years I thought I was looking at 9. 9 ranches, 9 bad surveys, 9 families in 1 county. And it's 41, Caleb said. It's 41, and they're not in 1 county. They're in 9. She had the little book open, and her hand was flying down a column. Ira, look at the pattern. Look at the shape of it. What do you see? Ma'am, I've looked at that page 400 times. Look at the water. Ira Kessler stopped. Every one of these, Eleanor Whitmore said, every single one of these 41 is a dry parcel or a marginal one. There's not one good piece of ground on this whole list. There's not one. They've bought 41 worthless ranches for a quarter, and they've been doing it for 4 years, and everybody in this territory thinks it's greed. It's not greed. It's assembly, she said. The room went silent. They're not buying ranches, Ira. They're building a right-of-way. Her hands were shaking now, finally. That's a line. That's 111 miles of continuous line from the Colorado border to the Montana road, and every parcel on it is worthless, and it is worthless specifically, and that's what took me 4 years, and I never had the map. Eleanor. Because you can't see it from Chicago, she said. You can't see it from a file. You have to be here. You have to be standing in it. And Anna Harper was standing in it in 1885 with a deed. And she wrote to the Surveyor General 4 times, and Ira, the 4th letter, the 9-page one. Do you know what the 9 pages are? No, ma'am. They're a list, Eleanor Whitmore said. In order, north to south. She listed 31 of them in 1885. Nobody breathed. She had 31. Eleanor said 6 years before Chicago had 9. Caleb Harper said, "Where's my ranch on that line?" And Eleanor Whitmore said nothing. "Ma'am." Caleb, "Where's my ranch?" "It's not on it," she said. He waited. "It's under it," Eleanor Whitmore said. She turned the book around. "You've got water," she said. "You have the only live water in 11 miles, and your claim was filed in 1871 by Anna's father, before there was a territory to file it in, and it's senior to everything on this table by 19 years. Caleb, 111 miles of right-of-way, and not one drop of water on it that isn't yours." Caleb Harper sat there. "That's why the offer's $1,200, Eleanor said. That's a thought she was going to pull that man out of the buggy by his collar. She didn't. She stopped 4 feet short, and she said one word. "Wallace?" He couldn't look at her. "Wallace Kerrigan, look at me." He looked at her. "How long have you known his name?" And Wallace Kerrigan said, 19 years. Caleb Harper lowered the rifle, not because he'd decided to. His arms just quit. 19. "Caleb, you've known him 19 years. He was my examiner," Wallace said. That's how it starts? That's all it ever was?" "He was the territorial bank examiner in 1874, and I was 28 years old, and he sat at my desk for 3 days and went through every line I had, and at the end of it he stood up, and he shook my hand, and he said, 'Mr. Kerrigan, you keep a beautiful book.' He put his face in his hands. "That's it," he said. "That's the whole thing. That's 19 years. Eleanor Whitmore said very quietly, "What's his name?" "Ma'am." "What is his name, Mr. Kerrigan?" And Wallace Kerrigan said, "Josiah Kell." Ira Kessler dropped his book. It hit the dirt, and it lay there, and nobody picked it up, and Ira Kessler stood in that yard and said, "No. Ira, no." He was shaking his head. "No, ma'am. No. Josiah Kell's dead. Josiah Kell's been dead since '82. He died in a hotel fire in Denver. It's in the agency file I've read the—" He stopped. Everything stopped. And Ira Kessler said in a voice that had nothing left in it at all, in a hotel, in Denver. Nobody spoke for 11 seconds. Eleanor Whitmore said, "Say it, Ira." "Ma'am, you said it in the wagon. You said a man can be missing 2 ways. Say it." Eleanor. "Vance walked out of a hotel in Denver in March of '91. Eleanor Whitmore said, "And Josiah Kell died in a hotel in Denver in 1882. And there's no body for either one of them. And Ira, I want you to say the thing you've been not saying for 2 years." Ira Kessler picked up his book with his bad hand. It took him 4 tries. "There's a man," he said, "who knows how to stop being somebody." Nobody breathed. "He's done it twice," Ira said. "That we know of." "Ma'am, that's not a criminal. I've chased 400 criminals. A criminal runs, and then he's a man in a different town with the same face, and I catch him in 9 months because he can't stop being who he is." He was crying, and his voice was flat. "This is a man who retires people, including himself," Wallace Kerrigan said from the buggy. "He's got a little tail on his K." Everyone turned. 19 years, Wallace said. "I've watched that hand sign 19 years of paper, and I never once thought about it. And then a woman picked up a sack of flour in the street last month and said that's a nice hand, and Caleb—" He stopped. "I've been sick since," Wallace Kerrigan said. 9 days. I have not slept 9 days. Because I went back in that book after she said it, and I looked at the 9 signatures, and then I looked at my own. And Caleb, I've been signing my own name with a little tail on the K for about 11 years. The yard was silent. "I picked it up off him," Wallace said. "Like a cold. 19 years of watching a man sign, and I picked up his hand. And I never knew it. And every one of those 9 offers I signed as agent has got my hand on it, and his hand in it. And there is not a court in this country that could tell the 2 of us apart." And Eleanor Whitmore said, "There's one person." "Ma'am, there's one person who could tell you apart," Eleanor Whitmore said. "There's exactly one person in the United States of America, and she's standing in this yard, and Mr. Kerrigan, I want you to hear what that means before you get out of that buggy." Wallace Kerrigan looked at her. "It means he's not coming for Caleb," she said. Ira Kessler said, "Oh God, he's not coming for the ranch. He's not coming for the water. He's had 4 years to get this water, and he could have burned this man out in '89, and nobody would have blinked." She was walking now, and her hands were moving, and Caleb Harper watched a woman who had been folding laundry in his kitchen for 11 weeks turn into something he had never seen. "There's 4 men who left this county at 4 o'clock this morning, and they left because somebody got an answer. And the answer wasn't, 'Is it her?' Then what was it?" "Can she still do it?" Eleanor Whitmore said. Nobody moved. "He's had 4 years to kill me," she said. 4. And he found Ostrander in 18 months, and he found Vance in 9, and he found Ira in a livery in Cheyenne. "Ira, how long did it take them to find you?" 6 weeks. 6 weeks. She turned. "And it's taken him 4 years to find a woman who got on a train under her own arithmetic and went to Omaha." "Caleb, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not clever. I hid in a bride agency. There's no genius in that. There's no—" She stopped. She put her hand over her mouth. "Eleanor." "He wasn't looking," Eleanor Whitmore said. Caleb Harper said, "What?" He wasn't looking for me. She had gone white. 4 years. 4 years, and I have been afraid of a man who has not spent $1 looking for me because he didn't have to, because he knew exactly where I was going to turn up. Ma'am, he made the ranch fail, she said. He made this whole county fail. Caleb, we worked that out on this table 3 nights ago, and I never— Her voice was going. I said it was assembly. I said they were killing the price. I said they bled 9 families out so you'd be alone and broke and grateful. Eleanor? And you mailed away for a wife. Ira Kessler sat down in the dirt. He made the fault, Eleanor Whitmore said. That's not a crack in the plan. That's the plan. Squeeze a county for 4 years, and the last man standing does something desperate, and there's only about 4 desperate things a rancher can do in this territory, and one of them comes with a list. Caleb Harper couldn't get his breath. The agency, he said. There's 11 bride agencies between here and the Missouri River, Eleanor said, and every one of them keeps a file on every woman who walks in the door, and Ira, you found me in 11 months by walking every single one of them. Ira Kessler had his hands over his head. And I'm a broken man with no money, he said. 11 months, on my own coin. How long would it take a bank examiner, ma'am? How long, Ira? And Ira Kessler said, 9 days. Nobody spoke. The wind came across that yard, and Wallace Kerrigan sat in his buggy in his church suit, and Dodd Pryor stood by his horse with his hat in his hands, and Marta Ruiz was in the doorway of the house, and nobody said one word. He put me here, Eleanor Whitmore said. Ma'am, he didn't find me in Dry Creek. Her voice was perfectly calm, and it was the worst sound in the county. He put me in Dry Creek. He spent 4 years building a hole exactly the shape of a desperate man, and the desperate man did the arithmetic and mailed $11 to Omaha, and there was a file waiting on a shelf, and it had my name in it. Eleanor, Caleb was shaking his head. Ma'am, that's not how would he know He didn't know, Eleanor said. That's the elegant part. He didn't have to know. Then, he had 11 agencies and 41 ranches and 4 years, she said. Caleb, he didn't need you to write to Omaha. He needed somebody to. Somewhere. Once. He put 100 desperate men in 100 dry counties, and he waited for one of them to reach for a woman off a list, because that's the one door a man like me walks through. Ira Kessler said from the dirt, That's the net. That's the net, Eleanor Whitmore agreed. He's been fishing for 4 years. He's been fishing for 4 years and he caught one, she said. And it's me and Caleb. I want you to hear the whole of it, because I've had it for about 90 seconds and it's going to take me the rest of my life. She turned around. He didn't ruin your ranch to get your water, Eleanor Whitmore said. He ruined your ranch to get your loneliness, and it worked, and here I am. Caleb Harper walked 11 steps and stopped. No. Caleb. No. Caleb, I'm sorry. No, ma'am. Listen to me. He turned around, and there were tears on his face, and he did not seem to know it. You're wrong. You are wrong, and it's the first time, and I want it on the record with a sheriff standing right there. Eleanor Whitmore stared at him. He didn't get my loneliness, Caleb Harper said. Caleb. He bought it. That's different. His voice broke. He bought a lonely man off a shelf in Omaha, and he got one, and the man he got had a clock wound backwards and a hook on a door and $11, and ma'am, he couldn't finish. Ma'am, he made a mistake, Caleb Harper said. What mistake? He sent you here. Nobody spoke. He could have sent you to 100 counties, Caleb said. He said so. 100 desperate men in 100 dry holes, and he doesn't care which. That's the whole thing. That's the arithmetic, and it's beautiful, and I understand it now, and here's what he got wrong. Caleb. He sent you to the one house in the United States of America. Caleb Harper said, with 22 letters in a cradle. Eleanor Whitmore put her hand out and caught the porch rail. Oh, she said, he couldn't have known. Caleb, he couldn't have known, ma'am. He could not possibly have known, because the man who knows about those letters is Ambrose Teal, and Ambrose Teal has spent 7 years praying nobody ever says the words Anna Harper out loud. Caleb Harper's hands were shaking. He's a judge, ma'am. He's got a bench. He's got a reputation. And you told me 3 nights ago that a man like Kell doesn't buy people, he ropes them, and I have been sitting with that for 3 nights, and here it is. Say it. Josiah Kell doesn't know about my wife. Caleb Harper said. Mamag. Ira Kessler got up out of the dirt. Sir? He doesn't know. Caleb was pacing now. Think about it. Think. Teal got those plats in 1886. He sat in an office and read a rancher's wife's arithmetic. And then he did what? He didn't build a syndicate, ma'am. He's a surveyor. He's a clerk with a title. He couldn't buy 111 miles of Wyoming if you gave him 9 lifetimes. He took it to somebody, Eleanor said. He took it to Kell, Caleb said. And Kell looked at 9 pages of a dead woman's handwriting and said, Where'd you get this? Nobody breathed. And Ambrose Teal lied, Caleb Harper said. Eleanor Whitmore sat down on the step. Oh my God, she said. He had to. Caleb was shaking. Ma'am, he had to. You told me what Kell does. Kell ropes people. Kell hands a man the one thing he wants and lets him keep his own mouth shut for the rest of his life. So Ambrose Teal walks into a room in 1888 with the best piece of work anybody in this territory ever did. And Josiah Kell says, Ambrose, this is remarkable. Where'd it come from? And Teal says, me. Eleanor Whitmore said. He says me, Caleb said, because he's got one shot at being a great man, and it's sitting in his hands, and it's not his. Dodd Pryor said, That's the whole rope. Everyone turned. The sheriff of Dry Creek County had not said one word in 20 minutes, and he had his hat in both hands, and he was looking at the ground. 22 years I've been the law here, Dodd said. And I've been sitting on an envelope for 14 months, wondering which of my neighbors looked at me and thought that man'll take it. He looked up. It's not $400, is it? No, Eleanor said. It's never $400. No, Sheriff. It's that somebody looked at me one time, Dodd Pryor said, and saw the exact thing I want most on this earth. And I've been 14 months trying to figure out who told them. And there's nobody to tell them, is there? That's the part. There's never been anybody to tell them. His voice cracked. He just looked at me. And Eleanor Whitmore said, That's what he does. So what's Teal want? Teal wanted to be the man who figured it out, she said. And what did he get? Eleanor Whitmore stood up. He got a bench, she said. Sheriff, that's it, that's the answer. That's what's been wrong for 3 days, and I couldn't see it. She was moving. Why is a surveyor general on the 1st Judicial District? Why he's not a judge? He was never a judge. He's a man with a transit and a title, and in 1890 he is suddenly the presiding judge of every land case in this territory. Kell put him there, Ira said. Kell paid him there, Eleanor Whitmore said. And he paid him in the only currency Ambrose Teal has ever wanted, which is being taken seriously by important men. And now, Ambrose Teal sits on a bench in Cheyenne, and every time he puts that robe on, he knows exactly what it cost, and there is not one living soul he can say it to. He can't get off, Caleb said. He can never get off, Eleanor Whitmore said. That's the rope. Kell never has to pull it. Teal wakes up every morning and pulls it himself. Marta Ruiz said from the doorway. Then he's alone. Everybody turned. Marta Ruiz, 61, in an apron, holding a dish towel she'd been holding for 20 minutes. Mija, she said. You said something on Tuesday, in my kitchen, about the letters. Marta, you said the only thing worse than being wrong in this country is being right by yourself. Marta's chin came up. You said that about Anna, and I've been 3 days with it in my chest like a stone. Nobody spoke. That man's been right by himself for 7 years, Marta Ruiz said. Eleanor Whitmore stood very still. Marta, He read her letters, Marta said. He wrote her back. He said, please continue to write to me and Mija. I posted those letters. Every Tuesday. In my apron. Her eyes were streaming, and her voice never moved. So don't tell me that man is happy. And Eleanor Whitmore said, Oh, Marta. What? Marta. What did I say? And Eleanor Whitmore turned around and looked at Ira Kessler and said, He kept them. Ira Kessler stood up so fast he nearly went over. Ma'am? He kept them. She had both hands on her head. Ira, 22 letters received. That's the Chicago file. That's the inbound at the land office, and it's 22. Yes. She wrote him 4 times personally. 4, direct to the Surveyor General, and the 4th one is the 9 pages. Eleanor Whitmore's voice was rising. So where are the other 4? The yard went silent. They're not in the federal file, she said. I've read the federal file. It's 22 letters to the General Land Office and the Interior, and a senator, and there is not one letter in it addressed to Ambrose Teal. Then where are they? He took them home, Eleanor Whitmore said. Nobody breathed. He had to take them home, she said. Because in 1888 he walked into a room and told Josiah Kell that this was his own work, and Ira, you can't do that with a woman's handwriting sitting in a file drawer at the land office. Ira Kessler said he'd burn them. He didn't burn them. Ma'am, any man alive would. Any man alive would. Eleanor Whitmore agreed. Any man, any criminal. Ira, a criminal, burns them Tuesday and sleeps like a baby, and you said that to me about Prentice. She stopped. She shook her head. About Kell. You said Kell'd burn it in a fireplace in Denver and sleep like a baby, and you're right, and that's Kell. Then, Teal's not Kell, she said. Teal's the other kind. Teal is exactly the kind of man who writes a woman a kind letter in December and means every word of it, and then does the worst thing anybody's ever done in this territory 18 months later, and Ira... Her voice broke. A man like that doesn't burn the letters, Eleanor Whitmore said. A man like that reads them. Caleb Harper said, That's a guess. Yes. Ma'am, that's a guess. It's the best guess I've made in 4 years, Eleanor Whitmore said, and it's the only thing on this table that isn't already dead. And Caleb, I want you to look at what we've got. Ira's book's a rumor. Wallace's ledger's got 2 hands in it, and no court on earth can split them. The Platts are gone, and they've been gone 7 years. And Teal is the only man who ever touched them. She put her hands flat on the rail. Everything I have has to go into a courtroom in Cheyenne and get handed to Ambrose Teal, so we go around him. There's no around, Eleanor said. That's what he bought Caleb. There's no around. Then we go to Chicago. Chicago's dead. The receivership closed in 92. Ostrander's in a doorway, and Vance is nowhere. And Petrie got Ira's wire on a Tuesday, and by Thursday there were 4 men in your town. She was shaking. Petrie's 19 years, Ira. 19 years, and he sold you in 6 days. Ira Kessler put his face in his good hand. So, there's nothing, Caleb said. There's one thing. Ma'am, there's 4 letters in a house in Cheyenne, Eleanor Whitmore said. In a dead woman's hand, dated 1885 and 1886, that lay out 31 parcels of this conspiracy in order north to south 3 years before it started. Nobody moved. And if they exist, she said, then Ambrose Teal didn't figure out one thing in his entire life. He read them, and every ruling that man has made from that bench for 3 years was made by a man who stole it off a rancher's wife who died in a snowbank. Dodd Pryor said, That's not a case, ma'am. That's a scandal. It's better than a case, Eleanor Whitmore said. How? And Eleanor Whitmore said, Because Josiah Kell doesn't know. The yard went absolutely silent. Say that again, Ira said. Kell doesn't know. She was walking. Ira, follow it. Kell bought a judge in 1888 because that judge was the smartest man in the territory and had figured out 111 miles of right-of-way with a transit and a pencil. That's what he paid for. That's the asset. Oh no. And it's not real, Eleanor Whitmore said. There is no asset. There's a clerk with a title and a stolen letter. And for 7 years, Josiah Kell has been running the biggest land conspiracy in the West on a piece of work he thinks belongs to a man who couldn't do arithmetic in a bathtub. Ira Kessler said, "Ma'am, if Kell ever found that out..." "He'd retire him," Eleanor said. "He'd retire him in a week. He'd retire him in a day," Eleanor Whitmore said. "Ira, that man has killed people for writing things down. What do you think he does to a man who's been lying to him at dinner for 7 years?" Caleb Harper said, "So we tell Kell." "No. Ma'am. No." She turned on him. "Caleb, no. Absolutely not." "You just said..." "I said Teal is standing on a rope and he's had 7 years to look down." Her voice was shaking. "I'm not going to cut it. I'm going to show it to him." Ira Kessler said, "That's the worst idea I've ever heard in 31 years. "I know." "Ma'am, you're talking about walking into a judge's house." "Yes." "In Cheyenne." "Yes." "And telling a man who is protected by the richest syndicate in the West that you've got his whole life in your hands, and Eleanor, he doesn't even have to do anything. He doesn't have to lift a finger. He says 4 words to Kell at supper, and you're a woman in a doorway, like Sam Ostrander." "Yes," Eleanor Whitmore said. "Then why?" And she said, "Because he wrote her back." The end. Nobody spoke. 22 letters, Eleanor Whitmore said. To the land office, to the interior, to a senator. 18 months. And not one human being in the government of the United States wrote that woman 1 word except one. "Ma'am, he read all 4, she said. "He said so. I have read all 4 of your letters personally. He didn't have to say that, Ira. Nobody made him. That's not a form. That's a man at a desk in December with a lamp reading a rancher's wife's 9 pages and writing back to say your work is remarkable." Caleb Harper had his hand over his mouth. "That's the man who did this," Eleanor Whitmore said. "That's the whole horror of it, and I've been 3 hours getting to it. It wasn't a villain. It was the only person who ever answered her." She turned around. "And he's had 7 years, she said. 7 years on a bench in a black robe ruling on land cases he stole out of a dead woman's mail, and there is not one soul on this earth he can say it to. And Marta's right. Marta's been right since Tuesday. He is not happy." Dodd Pryor said, "Ma'am, that's not a plan. That's a hope." "It's a lever, Sheriff. It's a hope with a nice hat on." "He kept the letters," Eleanor Whitmore said. "He kept them. Sheriff, I would bet my life, and I am about to, and I want everyone here to understand, that's not a figure of speech. I would bet my life that Ambrose Teal has 4 letters in his house in a dead woman's hand and has read them 100 times, because a man who burns them sleeps fine, and a man who is happy does not need to read them, and a man who put a bench and a robe and 7 years on top of a lie has to go look at it." Nobody moved. "That's not hope," Eleanor Whitmore said. "That's accounting. Every man carries a book, Sheriff. Every single one. And the question is never whether he keeps it. It's where." "Why?" Caleb Harper said. "I am going with you." "No." "Eleanor, you have 11 days on this ranch," she said. 11 days Caleb and Josiah Kell is going to be in that yard at noon, and if you're in Cheyenne with me, there's nobody standing on this ground, and it's gone by Friday and the whole line closes, and there's no case at all." "Then let it go." Everybody turned. "Caleb." "Let it go," Caleb Harper said. "Ma'am, let him have it. $1,200. I'll sign it at noon. He'll be standing right there with a pen, and I'll sign it and we'll get on a train." Eleanor Whitmore stared at him. "You don't mean that." "I mean every word. Caleb, this is your..." "It's dirt," Caleb Harper said. "Ma'am, it's 400 acres of dirt with water on it and a house with a hook on a door, and I have spent 6 years being the saddest man in this county on it, and I would sign it away in 9 seconds if it meant you got on a train east instead of a train to Cheyenne. Caleb. I've buried one, he said. The yard was silent. I've buried one, Eleanor, Caleb Harper said, and his voice went to pieces. I have buried one woman who was right by herself, and she wrote 22 letters out of that kitchen. And I never once asked her what she did all day, and there's a cradle in that room with her arithmetic in it, and I have walked past that door for 6 years. He stopped. He put both hands on his head. Don't ask me to do it twice, he said. Ma'am, I'm 41 years old and I've got 60 head and $40 and I am begging you. Don't ask me to do it twice. Eleanor Whitmore crossed that yard. She crossed it, and she put both hands on his face, and Marta Ruiz turned around and went into the house, and Dodd Pryor found something to look at, and Ira Kessler wrote nothing in his book. Caleb. Ma'am. Look at me. He looked at her. You said something to me at a table at 4 in the morning, Eleanor Whitmore said. Do you remember? I don't. You said you'd had a woman tell you a secret at 4 in the morning before, and you'd spent 6 years wishing you'd made her wait till daylight so you could see her face. Caleb Harper couldn't speak. It's daylight, she said. Eleanor. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, she said. I was born in Rockford, Illinois in 1860. My father was a bookkeeper for a lumber concern, and he taught me to read a ledger before he taught me to read a Bible, and he died owing $400 to a man who'd cheated him for 11 years, and I found it in 6 hours when I was 19, and it was too late. Her hands were shaking on his face, and her voice was not. I've never been married. I've never had a child. I was engaged one time, and I'm going to tell you about it. And it's going to be the worst thing I've ever said out loud, but not today. And I have been the finest reader of documents in the United States of America for 9 years, and I have never once been wrong, ma'am. And I am not going to Cheyenne because I'm brave, Eleanor Whitmore said. I want that on the record with a sheriff standing right there. I'm going because I read your wife's mail on the floor of a dead child's room, and I'm the only person left who can finish it. Caleb Harper closed his eyes. Then I'm coming. You're not? I'm coming. Caleb. And Caleb Harper said, Ma'am, who's going to knock on the door? Eleanor Whitmore stopped. What? You knock on Ambrose Teal's door in Cheyenne, and you're a woman he's never seen, and he shuts it in 9 seconds. Caleb Harper took her hands off his face and held on to them. And he's right to. He's a judge. There's people at that door every day of the week. Caleb. But I'm not a woman he's never seen, he said. I'm Anna's husband. The yard went absolutely silent. Ira Kessler said, Oh. He wrote her a kind letter in December of 1886. Caleb Harper said, And 7 weeks later she went out in a blizzard to mail him her arithmetic, and she took our son with her because I was in Cheyenne buying a bull. That's where I was. That's what I was doing. I was in his town, ma'am, buying a bull that died of blackleg in 1891. Caleb don't, and I have never told one living soul that, he said. Not Marta, not Dodd, not the preacher, 6 years. His whole body was shaking. And I'm going to stand on that man's step, and I'm going to say it to him. Eleanor Whitmore had her hand over her mouth. He'll open the door, Caleb Harper said. Dodd Pryor said, He'll open it. Everybody turned. The sheriff had his hat on now. 22 years, Dodd said. I've knocked on about 4,000 doors in this county, and I'll tell you the only thing I know about it. A man doesn't open the door for the law. He opens it for the thing he's been waiting for. He got on his horse. Sheriff, noon's in 90 minutes, Dodd Pryor said. And there's a man coming out here with a pen, and Caleb, I've been 14 months sitting on an envelope, and I've decided what I'm going to do about it. Dodd, I'm going to stand in your yard. Dodd Pryor said. That's not, I know it's not. He turned the horse. It's not a plan, and it's not brave, and it's about $400 worth of nothing, son. but I'm the sheriff of this county, and there's going to be a man in your yard at noon, and I have never once in 22 years been standing where I was supposed to be." He rode. Wallace Kerrigan was still in the buggy. He'd been in it the whole time. Nobody had looked at him in 20 minutes, and he had not moved 1 inch. And now he sat there in his church suit with his hands in his lap, and he said, "I'll sign it." Nobody understood him. Wallace. "I'll sign an affidavit," Wallace Kerrigan said. "About the hand." Eleanor Whitmore said, "Mr. Kerrigan, that doesn't—" "I know it doesn't." He looked up and his face was ruined. "Ma'am, I've been doing sums in that buggy for 20 minutes, and I know exactly what it's worth, and it's worth nothing. I'm the man who signed 9 of them. I'm the agent of record. Any lawyer alive stands me up and says, 'Mr. Kerrigan, whose hand is that?' And I've got to say mine, and that's the end of it, and it's the truth, and it's the only truth I've got." "Then why?" "Because I want it in a book," Wallace Kerrigan said. Nobody breathed. 19 years, he said. "That man sat at my desk in 1874 and went through every line I had and shook my hand and said, 'You keep a beautiful book.' And ma'am, I have kept a beautiful book for 19 years. That's all I've done. That's my whole life. I never married. I never had a boy. I've got 4,000 pages in that vault, and every one of them is perfect, and there are 9 lies in the middle of it, and I put them there." He picked up the reins. "So I'll sign it," he said, "and it won't help. And when I'm dead, somebody'll pull that book out of the vault, and they'll find 9 bad pages and 1 affidavit, and they'll know I knew." He turned the buggy. "That's all I want," Wallace Kerrigan said. "I want it in the book that I knew." And Eleanor Whitmore said, "Mr. Kerrigan, for 19 years, where were you standing?" And Wallace Kerrigan said, "At my counter." Eleanor Whitmore said, "Ira." Ira Kessler was already moving. "Ma'am?" "Mr. Kerrigan," Eleanor Whitmore said, and her voice had changed, and every soul in that yard heard it change. "In 19 years, has Josiah Kell ever signed anything in your bank that wasn't one of those 9? Wallace Kerrigan sat in his buggy, and then his face did something that Caleb Harper would remember for the rest of his life. "He's got an account," Wallace Kerrigan said. Yak, nobody moved. "He's had an account in my bank since 1876, Wallace said. "Personal, small. Ma'am, he opened it as the examiner he opened it because he was here 3 days, and he needed to cash a draft, and he never closed it, and it's got about $1,100 in it, and he signed a card." Eleanor Whitmore said, "In what name?" "Josiah Kell," Wallace Kerrigan said. Ira Kessler sat down in the dirt for the second time that morning. "That's a signature card," Eleanor Whitmore said. "In a vault, in his own name. Signed in 1876, 6 years before he died in a hotel fire in Denver." "Ma'am?" "With a little tail on the K," she said. Wallace Kerrigan started to cry. "It's been in my vault 19 years, he said. "It's been in my vault. It's 4 inches from the 9 of them. It's in the same drawer, ma'am. It's in the alphabetical. Mr. Kerrigan. 19 years. Wallace." Eleanor Whitmore was in front of the buggy now with both hands on the rail. "Listen to me. Listen. Nobody's ever found this man. Do you understand? Ira Kessler has been 31 years a detective and 11 months on a train, and he has never had one piece of paper with that man's name on it in his life." Ira Kessler said from the dirt, "He's dead, ma'am. Officially. He's been dead 11 years. Yes. There's a file. Yes. There's an agency file that says Josiah Kell burned to death in Denver in 1882, and I've read it and I believed it." "Yes," Eleanor Whitmore said. "And Ira, who does a dead man's estate, go to—" Nobody breathed. "Who administered it?" she said. And Ira Kessler said, "Oh my God." "There's a probate," Eleanor Whitmore said. "Somewhere. 1882. Denver. There's a court file with a dead man's name on it, and an executor's name under it, And Ira, that's the only time in Josiah Kell's entire life that he had to let somebody else hold the pen. Caleb Harper said, "The photograph." Everybody turned. "Ma'am?" He was very pale. "The photograph. 6 of you on the courthouse steps. Ostrander made a joke and Vance wouldn't stand still. Caleb, you said 3 prints. 1 to the department, 1 on Ostrander's wall, and it's gone." His voice had dropped. "And Vance had the 3rd. "Yes." "And Vance walked out of a hotel in Denver in March of '91. The yard was silent. "Eleanor," Caleb Harper said, "why was Vance in Denver?" And Eleanor Whitmore stood in that yard and went absolutely white. "He was pulling probates," she said. Nobody spoke for a long moment. "He wired me," she said. "March the 9th. It was 4 lines, and I've had it 4 years, and I have read it 400 times, and I never once. What did it say? It said nothing here, coming home Thursday." Ira Kessler said, "He never came home." "He never came home," Eleanor Whitmore said. "And I've spent 4 years thinking they got him because of me, because of the case, because he was a witness." She had both hands on her head. "He wasn't a witness. He was a man in a records room in Denver, and Ira—" "He found it," Ira said. "He found it Wednesday," Eleanor Whitmore said. And Caleb Harper said, "Then it's still there." Everything stopped. "Ma'am, he wired you Monday saying nothing here," Caleb said, "and he disappeared Wednesday. So whatever he found it after the wire, and he never told a soul, and nobody's looked at it since." Eleanor Whitmore's mouth was open. "4 years," she said. "4 years." Caleb Harper agreed. "It's been sitting in a court file in Denver for 4 years and 11 months, and nobody's looked because the one man who knew where it was got retired on a Wednesday." Ira Kessler stood up. "Sir," he said, "I've got about $9 in a bad hand." "I've got $40 in 11 days, Caleb Harper said. "And Eleanor Whitmore Evelyn Brooks, the mail-order bride." Everybody in Dry Creek had laughed at on a street in front of 40 people said, "Then somebody had better be in Cheyenne on a doorstep by Thursday." She turned around and looked at the road. There was dust on it. "Because it's 10 minutes to noon," Eleanor Whitmore said. "And he's early. He was early by 11 minutes, and he came alone. And that was the first thing that frightened Ira Kessler more than anything else that morning." "1 buggy," Ira said. "Ma'am, 1 buggy. I see it. He's got 4 men, and he left them in Cheyenne." "I see it, Ira." "Eleanor, listen to me. A man who brings 4 men is a man doing business." Ira Kessler had his good hand on her arm. "A man who comes alone has already decided how it ends." Caleb Harper said, "Get in the house." "Caleb, ma'am, get in the house." "No." "Eleanor." "He has never seen my face," Eleanor Whitmore said. 4 years. Do you understand? There's 1 photograph in the world, and it's in a dead man's pocket in Denver, and Josiah Kell has never once in his life laid eyes on me and Caleb. He is about to get out of that buggy and look at a woman in a doorway, and he will not know." Ira Kessler said, "He'll know." "He won't." "Ma'am, he'll know in 4 seconds. "He'll know if I'm hiding," Eleanor Whitmore said. "Ira, that's the whole thing. That's the only card in this yard. He's spent 4 years building a net for a woman who runs, and I have run from Chicago to Omaha to a pantry in Wyoming, and I have hung meat and posted flour and been laughed at on a street, and I am done." She let go of Caleb's hand. "I'm going to make him coffee," Eleanor Whitmore said. He got out of that buggy like a man arriving at church, 60-some years old, a good coat. He took his hat off before his foot hit the ground, and Marta Ruiz, watching from the kitchen window, with a dish towel in both hands, said afterward that it was the most frightening thing she had ever seen a human being do, because it was polite, and she had known instantly that it had always been polite for 40 years, in every town, every single time. "Mr. Harper." Caleb Harper stood in his own yard with a rifle he hadn't raised. Mister? You'll want to put that down. I'd rather not. No. Josiah Kell agreed pleasantly. You'd rather not, but you'll want to. He looked around the yard unhurried. Sheriff Pryor. Good morning. Dodd Pryor said Kell. And Josiah Kell stopped. It was small. It was about a quarter of a second. And Ira Kessler, 63 years old. 31 years, a Pinkerton standing 11 feet away with a book against his chest, saw it and nearly went to his knees, because in 31 years he had never once watched a man's whole architecture take a hit. That's a name I haven't heard, Josiah Kell said. I imagine not. Where'd you get it, Sheriff? And Dodd Pryor said, off an envelope. Josiah Kell looked at the sheriff of Dry Creek County for a long moment. Then he laughed. $400 a year, he said. That's right. 14 months ago? That's right. You didn't take it. Kell put his hat back on. He seemed genuinely warmly delighted. Sheriff, do you know how many men have not taken it? Dodd Pryor didn't answer. 2, Josiah Kell said. In 41 years, 2 men. And one of them was a Methodist in Nebraska who was dead of a bad heart inside a year, so really it's you. He shook his head, smiling. I want you to understand that's not a small thing. That's a remarkable thing. Most men don't even know they've been asked. That's the beautiful part. You give a man a number, and he thinks he's being considered. Kell, you've been sitting on that envelope 14 months, Josiah Kell said. Haven't you? Dodd Pryor's jaw moved. You have. Of course you have. You've been sitting on it and losing sleep and wondering which one of your neighbors sold you out. Kell's voice was kind. That was the unbearable thing. It was kind. Nobody sold you out, son. Nobody's ever sold anybody out. There's no list. There's no meeting. I looked at you one time in 1891 at a stock hearing in Cheyenne for about 9 minutes, and I knew exactly what you wanted. And I wrote a number on an envelope, and I have not thought about you since. He turned toward the house. And you've thought about me every day for 14 months, Josiah Kell said. That's the trade, Sheriff. That's all it ever is. Eleanor Whitmore was in the doorway with a coffee pot. Josiah Kell stopped. He stopped and he looked at her. And Caleb Harper stopped breathing, and Ira Kessler put his hand on the porch rail, and 11 feet of Wyoming yard sat there, and did nothing at all for 4 full seconds. Ma'am. Mr. Kell? You'd be the wife. I'd be the wife, Eleanor Whitmore said. You'll want coffee. It's cold, and you've come 4 hours. And Josiah Kell said, thank you. He came up on that porch. And he sat down at Caleb Harper's own table, and he let a woman he had spent 4 years and $40,000 hunting pour him a cup of coffee, and he said thank you again, and he drank it. Marta Ruiz would say until the day she died that she watched the whole thing through a doorway with a dish towel in her hands, and she never once breathed. Toy, you keep a good house, Kell said. It's not mine. No, it's Anna Harper's house, Eleanor Whitmore said. I've been in it 11 weeks. And Josiah Kell said, who? The kitchen went absolutely silent. Nobody moved. Not Caleb in the doorway with the rifle. Not Ira with his book. Not Marta at the sink with her hands in the air. Because it was real. That was the thing. Every soul in that room knew it. In the same half-second the man had said, who the way a man says who, with his cup halfway up and his face doing nothing at all, and it was the most honest sound that had been made in that county in 4 years. Eleanor Whitmore set the pot down. You don't know, she said. Ma'am, you don't know her name. Should I? And Eleanor Whitmore sat down across from him and said, Mr. Kell, how much have you spent in this county? Chete. He smiled. That's a strange question. It's the only question, she said. Humor me. I'm a rancher's wife, and it's cold, and you're here till noon anyway. Ma'am, 9 ranches at a quarter, Eleanor Whitmore said. 4 years. Freight subsidies at the mercantile to hold the squeeze, that's 11 cents against 6. That's 2 years of somebody eating the difference. 4 men in a hotel for 9 days at 3 meals. A bank examiner's salary. You've been paying somebody since 1874 to sit in a chair, and $400 a year to a sheriff who said no. Josiah Kell had stopped drinking. That's about $41,000, she said. Give or take. I'd want the freight contracts to say closer. Nobody breathed. And you're going to hand a man $1,200? Eleanor Whitmore said, in about 4 minutes for the last piece. Josiah Kell set his cup down very carefully. Who are you? He said. I'm the wife. Ma'am. Mr. Kell, you've spent $41,000 and 4 years in a county with 9 families in it, Eleanor Whitmore said, and you don't know the name of the woman who wrote the list. The kitchen was silent for 11 seconds. Then Josiah Kell said, What list? And Eleanor Whitmore said, There it is. Ma'am, Ambrose Teal gave you 9 pages in 1888, she said, north to south, 31 parcels, in order with the water noted and the senior claims flagged and the survey discrepancies marked in the margin, and Mr. Kell, I want you to look at me, because this is the part. Josiah Kell did not move. You looked at that and you said, Ambrose, this is remarkable. Where'd it come from? Nobody breathed. And he said me, Eleanor Whitmore said. Caleb Harper watched a man's face change and would spend the rest of his life trying to describe it and would never once get it right. It didn't crack. It didn't fall. It went absolutely still. The stillness of a man who has been handed a number and is doing the arithmetic and does not like where it comes out, and it lasted about 9 seconds, and in the middle of it, Josiah Kell said one word. No. Yes. No, ma'am. You've been running 111 miles of right-of-way for 7 years, Eleanor Whitmore said. Off a piece of work you believe was done by a man who could not do long division in a bathtub. And you have never once checked because he handed it to you, and it was right, and Mr. Kell being right is the only credential anybody's ever needed with you. Ma'am, you bought him a bench. Ma'am, you bought Ambrose Teal the 1st Judicial District in 1890. And you did it because you thought you were buying the smartest man in Wyoming Territory. Eleanor Whitmore said, And you weren't. You were buying a clerk with a transit and a stolen letter, and he's been sitting at your table for 7 years letting you think it. Josiah Kell said, Who wrote it? Eleanor Whitmore said, Anna Harper. Who is Anna Harper? And Caleb Harper said from the doorway, She's my wife. Pushta. Josiah Kell turned around in his chair. He looked at Caleb Harper for a long moment. She's dead, Caleb said. When? January of 1887. She went out in a blizzard with our son to mail him her arithmetic, and she went into a draw 4 miles from this table, and I was in Cheyenne buying a bull. His voice was going, and he didn't care. And 2 years later, you started buying this county in the exact order she wrote it down. Nobody moved. She was 31 years old, Caleb Harper said. She never went to a school past 14. She figured it off her own deed with a pencil in 1885, and she wrote 22 letters to the government of the United States about it over 18 months, and not one human being on this earth ever wrote her back except him. Josiah Kell said very quietly, He wrote her back. Once, Eleanor Whitmore said. The 4th of December, 1886. It's the kindest letter I have ever read in my life, and I've read 10,000 documents. It says her work is remarkable. It says he read all 4 personally. It says, Please continue to write to me. Please send me everything you have. She put it on the table. She put it on the table face up and pushed it across, and Josiah Kell looked down at it and did not touch it. And she did, Eleanor Whitmore said. She sent him the plats. The originals. Her father's filed in 1871. And then she wrote him 18 more times, and he never answered one. And she went out in January, and a clerk in Chicago closed her file with a pencil in 4 words. What words? Correspondent deceased. Weather. Closed. Josiah Kell read the letter. It took him about 40 seconds, and nobody in that kitchen made a sound. And at the end of it, He sat back in his chair and put one hand flat on the table and said, "That son of a bitch." Ira Kessler said afterward that he had never heard a man swear like that in his life, not angry, not even surprised, wounded. Mr. Kell. 7 years. Josiah Kell was looking at nothing. 7 years. I've had that man to supper 11 times. I've had him to supper. Kell. He sat in my dining room in 1890, and I asked him how he'd done it. His voice was perfectly level, and there was something horrible underneath it. How he'd seen it. 111 miles off a survey book, and I asked him how, and he said, he stopped. What did he say? Eleanor Whitmore said. He said he'd been out on the ground, Josiah Kell said. He said, "Josiah, you can't see it from an office. You have to be standing in it." The kitchen was silent. "That's her sentence," Eleanor Whitmore said. "What?" "That's her sentence, Mr. Kell. It's in the 4th letter. Page 6. I read it on the floor of a dead child's room 4 days ago, and I've had it in my chest since." Her voice broke once, and she took it back. "Sir, you cannot see this from an office. You have to be standing in it." Josiah Kell closed his eyes. "He said it at my table," he said. Caleb Harper said, "What are you going to do?" And Josiah Kell opened his eyes and looked at him, and Ira Kessler said afterward that this was the moment right here, this second, when he understood that they had all been wrong about everything for 4 years. "Nothing," Josiah Kell said. "Boy. What?" "Nothing, Mr. Harper." He picked his coffee back up. His hand was perfectly steady. "You've had a hell of a morning, and I'm sorry for it, truly. But I want you to understand what you've actually done here because I don't think you do, and it would be unkind to let you sit in it. Kell, you've told me that a man I employ lied to me about the provenance of an idea," Josiah Kell said 8 years ago. Nobody spoke. "That's it," he said. "That's the whole thing. That's what's on this table. It's not a crime, ma'am." He said it gently. "It's not even a tort. There's no injury. Mrs. Harper wasn't paid for it. She wasn't going to be paid for it. She mailed it to the government of the United States for free, and the government of the United States threw it in a drawer. I didn't take one thing from that woman that anybody in this country would call property." He drank his coffee. "And I want to be very clear with you because I've been at this 41 years, and I have never once lied to a person at a table. Everything I've done in this county is legal." Eleanor Whitmore said, "The signatures are Wallace Kerrigan's," Josiah Kell said. She stopped. "He's the agent of record," Kell said. "He signed everyone. He'll say so. He'll say so to any court you like because it's true, ma'am, and I've never asked that man to say one false thing in 19 years. That's the part nobody ever believes." He set the cup down. "I don't need people to lie for me. It's expensive and they're bad at it. I need them to tell the truth about something that isn't the point." Ira Kessler said, "The 41. "Mr. Kessler." Josiah Kell turned and he was smiling again, and it was warm. "How's the hand?" The kitchen went to ice. "You don't answer that," Caleb Harper said. "He can answer it if he likes." "You don't answer that, Ira." And Ira Kessler said, "It doesn't open." "No," Josiah Kell said. "I don't imagine it does." "You had it broken." "I had nothing broken," Kell said pleasantly. "I have never in my life told a man to break another man's hand, and Mr. Kessler, if you'll do me the courtesy of remembering the room, and I know you remember the room, you'll recall that nobody said a word to you. Not one word. That's not an oversight. That's the entire craft." He looked at his cup. "There's a man in Cheyenne who understood in 1891 that I would be pleased if you stopped writing. Nobody told him. He worked it out. And he did a thing that I would never have asked for and would not have permitted, and I have not spoken to him since, and he has not been paid $1 since, and he is still waiting, Mr. Kessler. Right now, today, 2 years. Ira Kessler's face had gone gray. That's not a defense, Eleanor said. It's not a defense, ma'am. It's a description. Josiah Kell folded his hands. I've never hired a man to hurt anybody. I've never had to. You give people a number, and they invent the rest themselves, and then they carry it, and it's theirs, and there's nothing in a book anywhere with my name on it. And Eleanor Whitmore said, There's a signature card in Wallace Kerrigan's vault. Josiah Kell did not move. For 11 full seconds. Say that again, he said. 1876, Eleanor Whitmore said. Personal account, $1,100. Opened by the Territorial Bank Examiner because he was in town 3 days and needed to cash a draft and never closed, and it's 4 inches from the 9 offers in the same alphabetical drawer. Kell's face was absolutely still. In your own name, she said. 6 years before you burned to death in a hotel in Denver. Nobody breathed. With a little tail on the K, Eleanor Whitmore said. Marta Ruiz said later that the man laughed. He did. He put his head back in Caleb Harper's kitchen and laughed like a man at a fair, and it went on for about 4 seconds, and then it stopped like a door. Wallace, he said. 19 years. And then he put his hat on and went down the steps, and the last thing anybody in that house ever heard Josiah Kell say was, Thank you for the coffee. He said it without turning around, and he got in that buggy, and then he stopped with the reins in his hands and looked back at Caleb Harper one time and did the only genuinely cruel thing he did all morning. Mr. Harper? Mister. For what it's worth, and I understand it's worth nothing, I'd have paid her. Caleb Harper couldn't speak. If she'd have written to me in '85 instead of the government, Josiah Kell said. 9 pages like that, I'd have put her on a salary. She'd be alive, she'd be rich, she'd have hated every minute of it, and she'd have done it anyway because people like that can't stop. He clicked at the horse. That's the whole tragedy of your wife's son, she wrote to the honest men. He was 400 yards down that road before anybody in that yard breathed. Denver, Eleanor Whitmore said. Now, ma'am? Ira. He's going to be at Teal's table at 6 o'clock. She was already moving. We just put a rope in that man's hands and lit both ends of it, and there's one night before Josiah Kell retires him. If Teal's gone, the letters are gone, and I don't have a case. I've got a rumor with a widower attached. Eleanor. She stopped. Ira Kessler stood in the middle of that yard with his book in his good hand and his ruined one against his chest, and he was looking at her the way a man looks at a thing he has finally understood after 31 years. He wanted us to know, he said. The yard went quiet. What? He told us where he's having supper. Ira's voice was very small. Ma'am, he told us. 41 years of never putting his name on a piece of paper, and he stood on that porch and announced his itinerary like a man reading a train schedule. Nobody moved. He's not going to Teal's, Ira Kessler said. He's going to the bank. And they caught Wallace Kerrigan 4 miles out with his buggy stopped dead in the middle of the road. He was just sitting in it. Wallace? I've been here 20 minutes. Wallace, listen. I couldn't make the horse go. Wallace Kerrigan said, and his face came apart, and a 50-year-old man wept into his own hands in the middle of a Wyoming road. I've been trying to figure out how a man says goodbye to a vault. Eleanor Whitmore was out of the wagon before it stopped. Mr. Kerrigan, look at me. Where's the card? Drawer 4. Who has a key? Me. He wiped his face with his sleeve like a boy. Me and... He stopped. Everything in that road stopped. Wallace, Caleb Harper said. Who else has a key? And Wallace Kerrigan said, the Examiner. Eleanor Whitmore closed her eyes. He doesn't have to steal it, Wallace said. Ma'am, do you understand? He can walk in my front door at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning in front of God and my own clerk and pull any drawer in that vault, and it's legal. He's the examiner of record for this territory. He's been the examiner of record since before I had hair. Then we take it first. Ma'am? Wallace, go Go get it. Now. You're 11 minutes closer than he is." Wallace Kerrigan picked up his reins. "Yes'm," he said, and Caleb Harper said, "No." Bab. Everybody turned. Caleb. "No, ma'am." He was very quiet. "Wallace, don't move. Eleanor, listen to me for 1 minute. He walks in that bank tomorrow with a legal key and finds an empty drawer. And by noon, there's a wire to Cheyenne. And by Thursday, there's a warrant for Wallace Kerrigan for stealing bank records and your cards sitting in an evidence room in a courthouse. In front of Ambrose Teal," Eleanor Whitmore said. She put her hand over her mouth. "Oh," she said. "Oh, that's the trap," Caleb said. "It's always the same trap. Everything we get has to walk through that room." And Ira Kessler said, "Then get it out of the territory." Everybody turned. "Ma'am, there's exactly one thing in this whole business that isn't in Wyoming." "Denver," Eleanor Whitmore said. "Denver," Ira Kessler said. "Colorado. Different territory, different bench, different everything. There's a probate file in a records room with a dead man's name on it, and nobody's looked at it in 4 years and 11 months because the one man who knew where it was got retired on a Wednesday. Ira, you don't need the card, ma'am. You need the card and the probate. One of them's in Wallace's drawer and the other one's in Colorado, and put them side by side, and you've got a dead man's signature in 76, and a dead man's estate in 82, and 9 offers in 89, and there is not one judge in the United States who can look at that and say the word coincidence with a straight face." Eleanor Whitmore said, "Then somebody had better be on a train." Why, Dodd Pryor caught them at the crossroads. He'd run that horse 4 miles, and he came off it before it stopped, and he had a piece of paper crushed in his fist. Wire. Dodd? It came in at 11:40. Dodd Pryor's chest was heaving. 11:40, Caleb. That's while the man was sitting at your table drinking your coffee. Eleanor Whitmore took it. She read it. She read it again. Then she sat down in the road. "Ma'am, it's from Petrie," she said. Ira Kessler said, "No. It's from Petrie, and it's addressed to Ira Kessler, care of the Dry Creek Hotel." "Ma'am, don't. It's 4 words. Don't read it." And she read it. "Get out. They're coming." Nobody spoke. Ira Kessler stood in the middle of a road with his book against his chest and went the color of paper. 19 years, he said. "Ira! He sold me in 6 days." His voice was breaking apart in his mouth. "I sent that man 5 words on a Tuesday, and there were 4 men in this town by Thursday morning, and I have spent 9 days in a hotel room hating him. I laid in a bed and hated a man I'd have died for, Ira. And he's been trying to get me out of this county since Tuesday." Eleanor Whitmore stood up. "No," she said. "Ma'am, Ira, think." She had that wire in both hands. "Petrie got your wire Tuesday at 4. There were 4 men here Thursday morning. That's Chicago to Cheyenne to Dry Creek in 36 hours, and Ira, that isn't possible." Ira Kessler stopped. "What? It isn't possible. Chicago to Cheyenne is a day and a half on the best day God ever made, and then somebody has to sit in an office and read your wire and decide and find 4 men and put them on a train." Her voice was rising. "You cannot have 4 men standing on a platform in Dry Creek by Thursday morning off a wire sent Tuesday afternoon. It cannot be done. I've done freight schedules for 4 years, and I am telling you it cannot be done." Nobody breathed. "They were already coming," Caleb Harper said. "They were already here," Eleanor Whitmore said. "They were in Cheyenne. They've been in Cheyenne. Ira, those 4 men were never sent from Chicago at all. Petrie never sent anybody." "Then who?" "Kell," she said. "Kell's had 4 men sitting in Cheyenne for 4 years, waiting for one of 100 desperate ranchers to mail $11 to Omaha. They weren't sent for you. They were stationed." Ira Kessler put his hand over his face. Then what's the wire? Dodd Pryor said. And Eleanor Whitmore said, it's a warning. He didn't sell you Ira. Look at the shape of it. You wired him 5 words on a Tuesday, and he sat on it 9 days, and then he sent you 4 with no signature to a hotel he knows you already left. Ma'am. Why 9 days? I don't. Why 9 days, Ira? He's your case officer. 19 years. You wire him found her after 4 years of nothing, and he doesn't answer for 9 days. And Ira Kessler said he was checking. He was checking, Eleanor Whitmore agreed. He got that wire, and he went and looked at his own agency, and it took him 9 days. And Ira, what do you think he found? Nobody spoke. He found the file, Ira Kessler said. He found your file. The one that says Josiah Kell burned to death in a hotel in Denver in 1882. And he pulled it out of the drawer, and he looked at who wrote it. Ira Kessler said, Oh God. Who signed it, Ira? I don't know. Ira, I never looked. It came out of him like something tearing. Ma'am, I never once looked. It's an agency file. You don't look at who wrote it, you look at what it says. That's the whole... He stopped. That's the whole business, Eleanor Whitmore said quietly. Right there, in one sentence. It took me 4 years, and it took you 31. Nobody ever looks at who wrote it. They put Ira Kessler on the eastbound at 4 o'clock that afternoon with $9 a book and Caleb Harper's 40. Denver, probate, 1882. Ma'am, Ira, the executor's name, is the whole case. She had both hands on the window. A dead man's estate. Somebody signed for it. Somebody stood in a Colorado courtroom in 82 and swore an oath about Josiah Kell's effects, and that name has been sitting in a drawer 11 hours from here for 11 years, and nobody's looked at it in 4. And if it's nothing, then Vance died for nothing, Eleanor Whitmore said, and I'll say so out loud for the rest of my life. Ira Kessler put his good hand over hers on the sill. Ma'am, don't. I've got to. Don't you dare say goodbye to me, Ira Kessler. I'm not. His face was wet, and his voice was flat as a table. I'm going to say the other thing. I came out here to use you. It's true, and I'm not going to be soft about it now. I built a speech in a hotel room for 9 days about how you owed this country a debt, and it was a good speech, and I'm ashamed of how good it was. Ira, and then I sat in a barn 4 days and read a dead woman's mail, he said. And ma'am, here's all I've got. She was right by herself. That's what killed her. Not the weather, not the draw. She was right alone for 18 months. The train pulled. You're not alone, Ira Kessler said. Not one more day. That's the whole difference, and you're hearing it from a man who spent 31 years making sure people were alone before I got to them. Thursday, Eleanor Whitmore said. Thursday, Ira Kessler said, egging. Caleb Harper knocked on Ambrose Teal's door in Cheyenne at 11 o'clock the next morning. They'd driven all night. Eleanor Whitmore stood 4 feet behind him on that step and said nothing because they had worked it out at 2 in the morning in a wagon, and the whole thing turned on 9 seconds and a name. A housekeeper opened it. The judge isn't receiving. Ma'am, he hasn't been well. And Caleb Harper said, tell him Anna Harper's husband is on his step. The woman blinked. Sir. Tell him, Anna Harper, Dry Creek, 1886. She shut the door. They stood there, 9 seconds, 11, 20. Caleb, Eleanor started. The door came open so hard it hit the wall. Ambrose Teal was 68 years old, and he had not shaved, and he was in his shirt sleeves at 11 in the morning, and he looked at Caleb Harper, and his whole face went down like a wall. You're her husband. Yes. You're her husband. Yes, sir. And the presiding judge of the 1st Judicial District of the Territory of Wyoming put both hands over his face and made a sound Eleanor Whitmore would hear at 3 in the morning for the rest of her life. He was here, Teal said. Who was? Josiah. His hands came down. Last night. He sat at my table at 6 o'clock, and he ate everything on his plate, and he talked about cattle prices for 2 hours, and he never asked me one question. His voice was climbing. Not 1. 2 hours. And then he stood up and he put his hat on and he said, he stopped. What did he say? Eleanor Whitmore said. And Ambrose Teal said, Ambrose, how'd you see it? Dad. They got him into a chair. That's all, Teal said. That's the whole thing. 8 words at my own front door with his hat in his hand. He's asked me that 100 times in 7 years. It's a joke between us. He asks it at dinner. He asks it at the club. He asked it in front of the governor once. And last night he waited for the answer, Ambrose Teal said. Nobody spoke. He's never waited, Teal whispered. In 7 years. He asks it and he laughs, and he moves on, because he already knows. Because I told him in '88, and it's settled. And last night he stood in my hall with his hat in his hand, and he waited 11 seconds, and I said what I always say. I said, you have to be standing in it, Josiah. And he said thank you, and he left, Ambrose Teal said. And I have been sitting in that room since. I haven't been to bed. I haven't been to the bench, ma'am. I've got a docket at 9 this morning, and I'm sitting in my house in my shirt sleeves, because I know what that 11 seconds was. Caleb Harper said, what was it? It was him being kind, Ambrose Teal said. He gave me one more night. Eleanor Whitmore put the letter on his table. She put it down face up and slid it across and said nothing at all. Ambrose Teal looked at it and did not touch it and did not need to because he knew his own hand from 4 feet away and his mouth started working. Where'd you get that? In a cradle, Caleb Harper said. Teal looked up. In my son's cradle, Caleb Harper said. Behind a door with a hook on it that I nailed shut in February of '87 and did not open again until 4 days ago. She put your letter in her dead baby's cradle, mister, and I walked past it for 6 years. Ambrose Teal started to cry. Don't, Eleanor Whitmore said. Ma'am, don't you cry in front of this man. Her voice was absolutely level, and it was terrible. You have not earned 1 tear in this house. You wrote to a woman in December, and you told her she had a rare mind, and you asked her to send you everything she had, and she did, and then you never wrote her again, and she went out in January to mail you more, and you have had 7 years and a bench and a black robe on top of it. I know. You know. I've known every day, Ambrose Teal said. Yeah. Where are they? Eleanor Whitmore said. He didn't move. Judge Teal, the other 4 letters. Where are they? They're not in the federal file, she said. I've read the federal file. 22 letters to the land office and the interior, and a senator, and there is not 1 addressed to the surveyor general in it, and you were the surveyor general, and she wrote to you 4 times. Ma'am, you took them home, Eleanor Whitmore said. You had to. You couldn't very well tell Josiah Kell it was your own work with a rancher's wife's handwriting sitting in a file drawer in Cheyenne. Ambrose Teal said nothing. And you didn't burn them, she said. How do you know that? Because a man who burns them sleeps fine, Eleanor Whitmore said, and you haven't been to bed. It took him 4 minutes to get up the stairs and 4 minutes to come back down, and he had a wooden case in his arms, and he set it on the table and stepped back from it, like a man stepping back from a stove. Eleanor Whitmore opened it. 4 letters. And under the 4 letters, a survey plat filed in 1871 by a man named Josiah Whitcomb Brand, and under that in a stack an inch thick 91 pages in the same handwriting. Caleb Harper made a sound. What is that? Eleanor said. That's the rest, Ambrose Teal said. The rest of what? And Ambrose Teal said, she kept writing. The room went absolutely silent. Say that again, Caleb Harper said. She wrote me 11 more times, Ambrose Teal said. After December. After I stopped answering. Every Tuesday, sir, for 7 weeks, and they got better every single one, and I never wrote her back, and she never once asked me why she just kept going. Caleb Harper had both hands on the table. You said 4. I lied. You said 4s? I've been lying for 7 years, Ambrose Teal said. That's what I do, sir. That's the only thing I've done since 1888, and you want me to tell you the worst part. The worst part isn't the bench. The worst part is that 11 letters came to my office after I'd already decided to steal them, and I read every single one the day it came. Why? Because they were the best thing in my life, Ambrose Teal said. Nobody spoke for a long moment. The last one's January 29th, Teal said. 1887. It came in on the 3rd of February, and I read it at my desk, and it's 9 words long, and there's... He couldn't. Read it, Caleb Harper said. Sir, read it. And Ambrose Teal, 68 years old, picked up the last letter Anna Harper ever wrote and read it out loud in his own dining room. Sir, am I doing this correctly? Please tell me if I am not. A.H. Caleb Harper turned around and put his forehead against the wall. January 29th, Eleanor Whitmore said. Yes. That's the day she died. Yes. She wrote that and she walked out into it. Yes, Ambrose Teal said. And Caleb Harper said from the wall without turning around, she was asking permission. Eleanor Whitmore did not move for 11 seconds. Then she said, Judge Teal, Denver, 1882. And the man went white to the lips. Ma'am, Josiah Kell's estate, Eleanor Whitmore said. There's a probate. Somebody administered it. Somebody stood in a courtroom in Colorado and swore an oath about a dead man's effects. Ambrose Teal did not speak. There's a friend of mine on a train, Eleanor Whitmore said, and he'll be in that records room at 9 o'clock this morning, and by tonight I'll have the executor's name and judge. I want you to tell me before he does. I want you to be a man who said it. The clock ran in the hall. It's me, Ambrose Teal said. Tall. Caleb Harper turned around. Say that again. It's me, Ambrose Teal said. I signed it. Denver, April of 1882. You told us. Eleanor Whitmore had gone gray. You told us you met him in 88. You said you took him the Platts in 88. I did take him the Platts in 88. You'd known him 6 years. I'd known him 16, Ambrose Teal said. The room tilted. He was the territorial bank examiner, and I was the surveyor general, and we sat on 4 commissions together between 74 and 82, Teal said. He was my friend, ma'am. He was the best friend I ever had in my life. And in 1882, he came to my house, and he sat where you're sitting, and he said, Ambrose, I need to stop being Josiah Kell. And I said, all right. You didn't ask why. I asked why. And he told me, Ambrose Teal said, and it was a good reason, and it was true. And I checked it, and I'd do it again. And ma'am, it isn't the point. And I'm not going to say it out loud, because the second I do, everybody in this room starts feeling sorry for him. And that's how it works. That's exactly how it works. That's how he's done it to 400 people for 41 years. Nobody breathed. I stood in a courtroom in Denver, Ambrose Teal said, and I swore an oath that my friend was dead, and I buried him on paper, and I never took $1 for it, and there's no rope on my neck for that, sir. There's no lever. I did it for free out of love, and it's the only clean thing I ever did in my life, and it is the thing that's going to hang me. Eleanor Whitmore stood up. You're the only man alive who can prove he exists. Yes. You created his death. Yes. Judge Teal. Ma'am, I know exactly what I am, Ambrose Teal said. I've known for 7 years. I'm the man who buried Josiah Kell in 82 out of friendship, and then in 88 I dug him up because I had 9 pages of a dead woman's work in my drawer, and I couldn't do one thing with them by myself. His voice went. I'm not a judge. I never was. I'm a surveyor with a stolen letter and a black robe and a friend I killed on paper, and I went and got him because I wanted somebody to look at me the way he looked at me when I handed him those pages. And he did. For 7 years, Ambrose Teal said. Every day. Best 7 years of my life. He sat down. And then a man knocked on my door, he said, and said the words, Anna Harper, and I want you to know something, ma'am. I want you to know exactly what I am. What? I was relieved, Ambrose Teal said. Ira Kessler wired at 4 o'clock that afternoon, and it was 6 words. Executor Teal, have file. Also something else. Eleanor Whitmore read it standing in a telegraph office in Cheyenne and said, What in God's name does that mean? He came in on the Thursday train at 9:30 in the morning, and he came off at running, which he had not done in 9 years, and he had a probate file under his bad arm and an envelope in his good hand, and his face was destroyed. Ira, it was in the file. Ira what? Ma'am, it was in the file. He couldn't get it out. 4 years and 11 months. He put it in the file. He put it in the file, Eleanor, and he signed the register on the way out like a man who'd found nothing, and he went and had his supper, and they got him that night. He held it out. It had one word on it. Eleanor. She didn't take it for a long moment. Then she did, and she opened it right there on a platform in Cheyenne, Wyoming, at 9:30 in the morning, with 11 people watching, and she read it, and she put her hand over her mouth and did not make one sound. Caleb Harper said, Eleanor. She read it twice. Eleanor. She folded it and put it inside her coat. Ma'am. I'm all right. You're not. I'm all right, Caleb. And then she looked up at him, and her face was wide open, and she said, He knew. Who knew? Vance. Her voice was in pieces. He found the executor on a Wednesday, and he knew exactly what it meant, and he knew what it was going to cost him. And he had about 6 hours, and he could have run, Caleb. He could have run. He had 6 hours and a train station, and he didn't use it. He sat down in a records room and wrote me a letter and put it in the file where nobody but me would ever think to look. Eleanor. He was going to marry me, Eleanor Whitmore said. Nobody spoke. March of 91, she said. We'd have been married in June, and he went to Denver to pull probates because I asked him to, because I said it's nothing. It's a formality. It's 4 days, be back by Thursday, and he wired me nothing here coming home Thursday, and he was lying. Caleb, he lied to me in 4 words to keep me from getting on a train. Ira Kessler had his hat off. What's it say, ma'am? He asked. It's not for you. No, ma'am, it's not. And Eleanor Whitmore stood on that platform and said it anyway because she'd had it memorized for about 90 seconds, and she would have it memorized for the rest of her life. Nellie, I've found it, and it's the whole thing, and I'm not going to make it home. Don't you dare do what you're about to do. Don't you dare spend the rest of your life in a hole because of me. If you ever find peace again, take it with both hands, and don't ask anybody's permission. And if you're reading this, it means you came back for the file, which means you're still you, which is all I ever wanted. Finish it. J.V. She burned the last page of that letter 11 weeks later. That was the part nobody in Dry Creek ever knew, and Caleb Harper only figured it out 4 years afterward. Sitting on a porch, she'd carried Vance's words in a leather journal for 4 years, and she'd torn out the page and burned it on her first night in that house. Because the page said, if you ever find peace again, take it with both hands. And she had just gotten off a stagecoach in front of 40 laughing people and married a stranger to disappear. No one can ever know who I really am. She hadn't been hiding from Josiah Kell that night. She'd been hiding from a dead man's permission. They tried it in Denver in September. That was Eleanor Whitmore's doing, and it took her 9 weeks, and it was the single finest piece of work anybody in that territory ever saw. And it came down to one sentence she said to a federal attorney in a hallway. Sir, the crime is a dead man. And the dead man died in Colorado. Ambrose Teal resigned from the bench on a Tuesday and testified for 9 days. He walked into that courtroom in a suit that didn't fit him anymore, and he sat down and he said his own name, and then a lawyer asked him what he did in April of 1882, and Ambrose Teal said, I buried my friend alive, and after that there was nothing anybody could do about any of it. He gave them the 4 commissions. He gave them the 16 years. He gave them 11 dinners and the governor's house, and a name in a ledger in a bank in Dry Creek, and a probate file with his own signature on it. And on the 4th day, a lawyer stood up and asked him the question the whole West was waiting for. "Judge Teal, the survey work. The 111 miles. How did you see it?" And Ambrose Teal looked out at that courtroom for a long moment. "I didn't," he said. The room made a sound. "A woman named Anna Harper saw it," Ambrose Teal said. "In 1885, in Dry Creek, Wyoming, on a kitchen table off her own deed with a pencil at 31 years old, with no schooling past the age of 14. She wrote it out in 9 pages, in the correct order, north to south, 3 years before 1 acre of it was ever bought." His voice held. "She mailed it to me because I was the surveyor general of this territory, and she believed that meant something. She wrote to me 15 times. I answered once. And then she died in a blizzard on the 29th of January, 1887, going to town to mail me a 16th. Nobody in that courtroom breathed. Everything I have ever been given since that day," Ambrose Teal said, "I was given for her work." Eleanor Whitmore put the card and the probate side by side on the 5th day. 1876, a signature card in a bank vault in Dry Creek. Josiah Kell. 1882, a probate in Denver. Josiah Kell deceased. 1889, 9 offers with a little tail on the K. She stood in front of a federal bench for 6 hours, and she did not raise her voice once. And Ira Kessler said afterward that it was like watching a person take a watch apart, and at the end of it, there was nothing left on the table but a man who had never existed, and 41 worthless ranches that added up to 111 miles. They arrested Josiah Kell in a dining room in Cheyenne on the 11th of October. He put his napkin down and stood up and put his hat on and said thank you to the waiter. He never once raised his voice either. He got 9 years, and he did 4 of them, and he died in a prison hospital in Colorado in 1898. And the thing that finished him was not the card, and it was not the probate. It was that the Rocky Mountain News ran a piece in November of '93 about a rancher's wife in Wyoming who had figured out 111 miles of railroad conspiracy with a pencil in 1885. And it ran her name in the headline, and for the last 4 years of his life, every single man who came to see Josiah Kell in that place asked him the same question. "Is it true a housewife caught you?" 31 ranches went back. Not all 41. That's the part nobody puts in the story. 7 of them had been sold twice by then, and 2 of the families were dead. And 1 man in Nebraska. Marta Ruiz's brother-in-law, 68 years old, sharecropping, took one look at the paper and said he was too old to start again, and would they please just send the money. They sent the money. Wallace Kerrigan signed his affidavit and lost his bank and moved to Laramie and kept books for a lumber yard for 19 more years. And he was very good at it, and every page was perfect. Dodd Pryor stayed sheriff 11 more years, and he kept that envelope in his desk the whole time. And when a young deputy asked him once why he didn't throw it out, Dodd Pryor said, "Son, that's the only thing in this office that's ever told me the truth about myself." Ira Kessler quit the agency and never worked another day, and spent the rest of his life in a room over the Dry Creek Mercantile, writing left-handed very slowly, and what he wrote was 400 pages about a woman named Anna Harper, and he finished it 11 days before he died, and it was terrible, and Eleanor Whitmore had it published anyway, because it was true. The harvest celebration was in October of the 2nd year. They put a table out and the whole town came, which was 400 people, which was every soul in that county, and about 11 of them had stood on a street on a Tuesday in January and laughed at a woman getting off a stagecoach. Bo Tillman came sober and shook her hand and could not look at her. Amos Bird, 72 years old, stood up on a wagon bed with a piece of paper he'd written out 4 times and couldn't read it, and finally just said, "She told me my freight was wrong," and sat down and cried. And Caleb Harper stood up. He was 43 years old, and he had 400 acres and water and 200 head, and a house with no hook on any door in it. Most of you, he said, have been calling my wife the mail-order bride for 2 years. Nobody laughed. Some of you called her worse, and I've forgiven every one of you, and I'd do it again, and I want to say why. His hands were shaking on that wagon rail. Because I mailed away for her. That's true. $11 to Omaha. And I did it because I was going to lose this place, and I figured a man alone gets moved off, but a married man's a lawsuit. That's the arithmetic. That's what I did. And I've been ashamed of it since October of '92, and I'm done being ashamed of it tonight. He looked at her. This is Eleanor Whitmore, Caleb Harper said. She was the chief forensic accountant of the Northern District Receivership in Chicago. And she is the finest reader of documents in the United States of America. And she is the reason 31 families in this territory are standing on their own ground. And she is not the woman who saved this county. The whole town went quiet. Anna Harper saved this county, Caleb Harper said, in 1885, on my kitchen table, with a pencil. And I never once asked her what she did all day. He stepped down. And I'd like to say her name out loud in front of everybody, he said, because for 6 years I couldn't, and there's about 400 of you here, and I want it heard. They were on the porch that night late after. Caleb, ma'am, I burned a page in your fireplace. I know. You know. First night, Caleb Harper said. I was sitting in that chair in the dark. I saw the whole thing. Eleanor Whitmore sat very still. You never said a word. No. 2 years. 2 years, he agreed. Why? And Caleb Harper said, because you'd have told me when you were ready, and if you never got ready, then that was yours. She put her face in her hands. It was Vance's letter, she said. I figured. It was the part where he... Her voice went. He said if I ever found peace again to take it with both hands and not ask anybody's permission. And I read that 4 years ago, and then I got on a train and got on another train and got on a coach. And I sat in your house on your first night, and I looked at that sentence, and I understood I was never going to do it. So you burned it. So I burned it, Eleanor Whitmore said, because I'd rather have no permission than permission I couldn't use. Caleb Harper reached over and took the letter out of the journal, the one Ira brought back from Denver, the one that had been sitting in a probate file for 4 years and 11 months. And he read it for the first time out loud, all of it. And when he got to the end, he folded it up and got out of that chair and walked into the house. She found him in the front room. He put Vance's letter on the mantel beside Anna Harper's portrait and squared it up with his thumb. There, he said. Caleb. 2 of them, Caleb Harper said. That's the whole thing, ma'am. There's 2 people in this house who died being right by themselves, and they're both up there now, and we're going to say their names out loud at this table for the rest of our lives, and neither one of us is ever going to pretend they didn't happen. Eleanor Whitmore couldn't speak. Anna Harper caught the biggest theft in the history of this territory, with a pencil, Caleb Harper said, and nobody wrote her back. Jacob Vance found the one file that proved it, and he had 6 hours to run, and he used them to write to you instead. And you got off a coach in front of 40 laughing people and hung meat in a pantry for 11 weeks and finished it. He turned around. That's not pity, he said. It's the truth.